Chapter 51. Even the announcer was stunned for a few seconds before rushing over to check on the other contestant's condition. His breathing was faint, with more air going out than coming in. Forget about whether he could stand up and continue fighting. If medical attention wasn't administered quickly, this might very well be the opponent's last match ever. Contestant number 2064 has lost the ability to continue. Contestant number 1999 is the winner. The announcer declared loudly. You can skip directly to the 50th floor. I have high hopes for you, the announcer said, handing a certificate to the young man still standing on the stage with an enthusiastic smile. Young, good-looking, strong, and seemingly a bit unruly, these were the traits that made a contestant a crowd favorite in the Heavens Arena. It meant one thing: hype. Take, for example, one of the most popular fighters above the 200th floor, the magician Hisoka. His fights were spectacular, his techniques brutally efficient with a flair of magical mystery and romanticism. Combined with his indescribable personality, his matches always had fans scrambling for tickets. Heaven's Arena made a fortune off him. As someone who dealt with all kinds of contestants every day, the announcer felt certain that the white-haired, tattooed boy in front of him would become another crowd puller adored by the masses. Ah! The boy, Seer, accepted the certificate without sparing even a single extra word. He turned and walked straight off the stage. As he descended, most of the audience stared at him with a mix of subtlety and shock. Seer ignored all their gazes, lost in his own thoughts as he walked. From here on, he decided, he wouldn't use any special techniques or abilities, not even then. He'd fight purely with his fists. Of course, he'd have to control his strength carefully. He needed to let everyone believe he was somewhat skilled, but not too strong. Otherwise, the betting odds would tank. And if that happened, he wouldn't be able to make much money betting on himself. If necessary, he could even pretend to lose a few times and start over from the bottom. That should still secure him some winnings. But wasn't that kind of embarrassing? Maybe he could just disguise himself with a new identity and re-enter the tournament instead. Besides, there shouldn't be any rules in the Heavens Arena forbidding contestants from betting on themselves. Right? The receptionist behind the counter spoke in an apologetic tone. Sorry, but only spectators are allowed to place bets. Contestants themselves cannot participate in betting. Her response was polished and professional, tinged with an air of familiarity as if she'd handled this kind of request countless times before. It seems Seer wasn't the first person to think of betting on himself for a big payday. But that didn't matter, he had other methods. If he couldn't bet on himself, he just bet on others. Seer listened to the explanation expressionlessly, then pulled out some cash and bought tickets to the next 5 matches. Now, as a spectator, he had the right to place bets. This one, and this one. I'll bet on them to win, he said, pointing to his chosen contestants. He placed his money on each of them. Even the experienced receptionist, who had seen her fair share of unusual bettors, froze for a moment. Placing bets wasn't uncommon, but most people only bet on one match at a time. Who bets on 5 matches at once? Ah. Sure, I'll process that for you. Here are your betting slips. She quickly masked her surprise and deftly typed into her computer, handing him the slips after a moment. Seer accepted the slips, already calculating how much he could potentially win. He'd chosen the 5 contestants using his 6 eyes ability, selecting the ones whose life energy was stronger than their opponents. He had wagered 50 million on each of the 5 contestants. The odds weren't particularly high, mostly around 2 to 1. If all went well, he'd make just over 100 million in total. Of course, there was always the chance that a stronger contestant might be upset by a weaker one. If someone was useless enough to lose like that, well, there wasn't much he could do. In any case, it'd be a small profit. He wouldn't lose his initial investment. A 200 million from reaching the 200th floor, the 200 million from Marrow, and the money I'll win from these bets. That'll make 500 million. After a few more rounds of betting, I'll have 800 million, Seer thought to himself. Too bad they don't allow bets over 10 million. Well, it is what it is. Taking the Jenny prize from his first match, Seer bought a can of juice. Carrying it, he headed toward the elevator. The first match's winnings were just enough to cover the juice, he couldn't even afford the chocolate bar next to it. What floor are you on? Seer asked, pressing the elevator's up button while glancing at the silent Marrow behind him. The 20th floor, Marrow replied hesitantly, his voice subdued. His performance had been lackluster, so he'd only made it to the 20th floor. Right then, the elevator doors opened. Pathetic, Seer remarked flatly as he stepped inside. Marrow hurriedly followed him. Inside, a neatly dressed elevator attendant stood ready to operate the controls. The elevator buttons were labeled in increments of 10. Welcome to the Heavens Arena. Each 10 floors is a division. The attendant began warmly, her smile professional as she observed the two newcomers. One of them looked like a mere child, yet he'd already reached the 50th floor. If you can't reach the 200th floor within a week, just stay here forever, the white-haired boy declared calmly. The blonde-haired boy lowered his head, responding with a subdued okay. With insufficient strength, even tagging along with an adult would only make him dead weight. Neither of them paid any attention to what the elevator attendant was saying. Good luck with your matches, she muttered wearily, offering her obligatory blessing. Marrow headed to the 20th floor, while Seer moved up to the 50th floor. From Seer's perspective, the skill level of the contestants here didn't seem much different from those on the lower levels. The announcement came quickly over the loudspeakers. Contestants Hill and Martin, please report to Arena C on the 59th floor. The only real difference from the lower floors was that names were now used instead of contestant numbers. Additionally, each arena only had one ring, unlike the lower levels where each arena had 16 rings. It all seemed a bit more formal here. Hill was the alias Seer had chosen. Using his real name in another world wasn't an option. What if he ended up cursed by some bizarre ability? 59th floor, Arena C, he murmured as he arrived at the arena. His opponent, a man, was already standing on the platform. The spectators and announcer were all in place. First-time contestant Hill, who has made his way directly to the 50th floor, versus Martin, who has fought his way here with multiple consecutive wins. Who do you think will emerge victorious? The announcer worked hard to hype up the crowd as the large screen displayed Seer and Martin's portraits. Below each portrait, a set of numbers scrolled and then stopped. Under the white-haired, blue-eyed boy's portrait, the odds were displayed as 2.1. Under Martin's portrait, the odds were 1.3. Clearly, most of the audience believed Martin had a higher chance of winning. After all, Martin looked broad-chested, muscular, and built like he could take on 4 of Seer at once. Standing in front of Seer, Martin's massive frame completely blocked the smaller boy from view. A bunch of idiots who only know how to gauge strength by muscles, Seer muttered, staring at his own odds on the screen for a long moment before looking away. Though, in truth, the odds could have been even higher. He had asked Marrow to place a bet on him outside the arena. He wasn't allowed to bet on himself, but having someone else do it for him. That wasn't against the rules. Chapter 52. The match begins. The announcer shouted loudly. Martin didn't make a move. Instead, he raised his fists and slammed them together with loud bangs, trying to intimidate his opponent. Seer, however, stood motionless, his expression blank, and closed his eyes. It was strange, his 6 eyes seemed to burden him far more heavily than they had ever affected Satoru Gojo in the original story. Even though he had possessed the 6 eyes for quite some time now, he still hadn't fully mastered them. Sure, they were powerful and convenient, but the toll they took on him was just as significant. Even with his eyes shut, the strain didn't ease much. Was it an issue with him or with the eyes themselves? Surely he wasn't so useless that, after all this time, he still couldn't master a pair of eyes. It felt like there was a much deeper problem at play. For that reason, he rarely used Gojo's techniques unless absolutely necessary. His most frequently used ability was Sukuna's dismantle. Whenever he used Gojo's techniques, the 6 eyes had to activate as well. And the moment the 6 eyes were in play, the burden increased. The result? Bloody noses and the unenviable experience of fighting while bleeding profusely. This wasn't the kind of combat experience he had envisioned. "Are you looking down on me?" Martin yelled, his face red with rage as he stared at the boy standing on the platform with his eyes closed. Seer tilted his head slightly. "Oh, no. You've misunderstood." The moment he took a single step forward, the match was already over. Martin's body crashed heavily onto the ground, convulsing as he coughed up a mouthful of blood. Before losing consciousness entirely, he heard the boy's cold, detached voice. "I'm looking down on everyone." The announcer and the audience fell into an awkward silence. Did that mean they were being looked down on as well? Breaking the tense atmosphere, the announcer quickly ran down to check on Martin. After confirming his condition, they stood up and declared through the microphone. "Martin is unable to continue. Hill is the winner. You can advance directly to the 150th floor. The announcer offered, handing Seer a pass. "No, I'll go up 1 floor at a time," the white-haired boy replied indifferently, casually refusing. After all, it wasn't every day he had so many opportunities to practice Black Flash on live targets. And the best part? If someone died, he wouldn't have to take responsibility, nor worry about being hunted down as a criminal. "Are you sure? Contestants below the 150th floor might not provide much of a challenge for you." The announcer tried to persuade him. "I don't care about challenges. Luck is all that matters," Seer replied nonchalantly, waving his hand and walking away, leaving the announcer baffled by his cryptic remark. Amid the cheers of the crowd, Seer stepped off the platform and made his way to the 60th floor. Finding a corner to sit in, he waited for the notification of his next match. "System, there's something wrong with my abilities, isn't there?" he asked, lowering his head and initiating an internal conversation with the system. "The host's abilities are perfectly fine," the system's tone was cold, emotionless, exactly like a tool without feelings. "So the 6 eyes are inherently this burdensome and difficult to control?" Seer questioned internally. Was he truly that useless? "It's because the host's compatibility with Satoru Gojo is only 20%, the system answered flatly. "A compatibility of 20 doesn't mean I can only control 20% of the ability, does it?" Seer asked, his brows furrowing deeply. He had assumed that once an ability was unlocked, he'd have full access to it. But now, did his ability control scale with compatibility as well? "Precisely," the system answered swiftly. Seer's expression fell instantly. "Ah. So dismantle was only at 30% as well. And not even at its peak 30%. That explained why its power felt so underwhelming. No wonder the 6 eyes burdened him so heavily. No wonder he felt like their only use was observing energy in others. It turned out he had unlocked just 20% of their potential. If he hadn't asked, the system probably wouldn't have mentioned it on its own. It was so unobtrusive, it was almost like it didn't exist. "I'm so weak," he muttered blankly, his tone so resigned it was almost humorous. His control over all the abilities he currently possessed hadn't even reached 50%. And there was still a heap of abilities yet to be unlocked. It was all the fault of this garbage system, never explaining anything properly. Classic scammer system. If it had human emotions, Seer could practically imagine it saying in a shifty voice, 20% compatibility and you want 100% power? Dream on. It fit perfectly with a system that dared to price a weapon at 10 billion. No wonder, Seer murmured to himself. I was wondering why, even with two of the strongest characters stacked together, I'm still not all that powerful despite both having over 50% combined compatibility. I don't even have half the strength of one of them, he said, before chuckling softly. Now that he knew the reason, it wasn't so bad anymore. The issue wasn't that the two strongest characters weren't strong enough, it was that his compatibility wasn't high enough. When both characters reached 100% compatibility, his control over their abilities would also reach 100%, finally allowing him to wield their full strength. With that in mind, these two characters were already insanely powerful. And here he was, only wielding a fraction of their strength, yet he was already doing fairly well. The system had only granted him this tiny portion of power at the beginning and had disappeared ever since. It gave him a total of 3 abilities, none of them complete. And the 6 eyes? Its burden was enormous. He had to figure out how to use them, extract cursed energy, and train on his own, all while the system remained silent and unhelpful. So, these eyes have other abilities I haven't unlocked yet. Seer muttered, pressing lightly on his eyelids with his fingers. No wonder his cursed energy recovery was so slow, at only 20% efficiency, of course, it would be sluggish. When he reached 100% mastery, it should be more like Satoru Gojo in the original story. While there would still be a burden, it wouldn't be nearly as severe as what he was dealing with now. Contestant Hill and Contestant Moon, please report to the 69th floor, Arena A, the broadcast announced his next match. Yawning, Seer got up lazily and made his way toward the arena. By 10 p.m., the matches at the Heavens Arena had ended for the day. They would resume the next morning at 10 a.m. Since the staff members needed rest too, the arena closed for the night. Seer and Marrow sat together, tallying their earnings. Sir, aside from the first 2 matches, the odds for your later matches were too low. Even if we placed bets, the profits wouldn't outweigh the taxes and the Heavens Arena's processing fees. So I didn't place any bets for you after that. The winnings from the first 2 matches came to 40 million Jenny, Marrow reported respectfully. Seer listened absent-mindedly, letting the words drift in one ear and out the other. By the 3rd match, the audience had already realized Seer's true strength, understanding that he belonged on the 150th floor or higher. As a result, the odds for his matches became so low that betting would have actually resulted in a loss. The prize money from my matches barely reached a few million, Seer sighed. After all, the prize money below the 190th floor was pitifully low. Above the 190th floor, however, it was said to start at tens of millions per match. How far did you get? Seer asked, looking at Marrow. The 80th floor. Marrow replied, head bowed in shame. He felt humiliated by his own weakness. Well, that's better than I expected. I was prepared for you to just rot on the 20th floor, Seer said with a dazzlingly bright, mocking smile. Marrow kept his head down, silent, but inwardly, he agreed with Seer's words. His previous performance had been abysmal. If you don't even know how to use Nen, then I assume you haven't developed your own ability yet? Seer suddenly asked, resting his chin in his hands. Ability? Marrow's expression turned blank, clearly unfamiliar with the concept. Ah, so he didn't even know about developing Nen abilities. Well, you probably don't even know your Nen affinity then. Let's do a test first. Seer stood up, grabbed a cup of water, and plucked a leaf from one of the potted plants in the Heavens Arena's corner, placing it on the surface of the water. The water divination test was designed for people unsure of their Nen affinity. Once the affinity was identified, they could figure out how to develop their abilities. Seer himself hadn't taken the test because his Nen abilities had manifested unexpectedly. Since they were already there, he didn't see a need to check his affinity. Try channeling your energy into it, Seer instructed, placing the cup of water in front of Mero. Mero cupped the glass with both hands. As time passed, the water showed no visible changes. Taste it, Seer suggested. Bitter, Mero replied after taking a sip. If the water's taste changes, that makes you a transmuter, Seer said, his tone suddenly tinged with interest. In water divination, increased water volume indicated an enhancer. A change in color signified an emitter. A change in taste revealed a transmuter. Movement of the leaf pointed to a manipulator. Water crystallizing showed a conjurer. Any other reaction was categorized as a specialist. Enhancers were the most common type of Nen users, often straightforward and stubborn. Emitters were impulsive and quick-tempered, transmuters were moody and prone to lying, conjurers were meticulous and neurotic, manipulators were crafty and persuasive, and specialists were individualistic, often with natural leadership qualities. Mero didn't understand what being a transmuter meant, but since Seer said it, he accepted it as fact. "What about you, sir?" he asked, curiosity evident in his tone. "Me?" Seer reached toward the glass, and before he could even touch it, the cup exploded with a loud bang, scattering water everywhere. "Probably a specialist," he said nonchalantly. It wasn't the result he'd initially expected. He had guessed conjurer, but it wasn't too far off. Kurapika, after all, was typically a conjurer, but his scarlet eyes shifted him into a specialist. Similarly, Seer's results might have been influenced by the 6 eyes, which were passive and always active. If the 6 eyes could be turned off, his result might have been conjurer instead. His Nen ability, the Wheel of Law, involved effects from multiple affinities, so strictly speaking, his abilities couldn't be confined to a single type. As for his Nunin abilities, such as the 6 eyes, they aligned with specialist. His techniques, Blue and Dismantle, could be categorized as emitter. His would-be domains, Unlimited Void and Malevolent Shrine, were harder to classify. In the end, the affinities didn't matter much to Seer. True strength didn't rely on being limited to a single affinity. Powerful users often crossed multiple categories. Chapter 53. Specialist. Mero repeated, his mind already labeling the specialist affinity as the strongest of all. "I heard transmuters are said to be moody and prone to lying." "That red-haired guy from the exam was a transmuter too," Seer remarked casually, glancing at Mero. "You really can't judge a book by its cover. Who would have thought this guy would share the same category as Hisoka? To think I'd share an affinity with him." Mero muttered, visibly shaken. He couldn't believe it. Not only did he fail to have the same affinity as the person he admired, but he was in the same category as that clownish-looking redhead. What does it matter? Hisoka's strength isn't bad. If you had his skills, you could reach the 200th floor effortlessly, Seer said, stretching out his legs, leaning back, and raising his hands. "That's true." Mero bowed his head, unable to refute. Though he disliked the flamboyant, eccentric redhead, Mero had to admit Hisoka's strength far surpassed his own. If he were that strong, he wouldn't be dragging others down. "I don't know much about transmuter abilities." Seer rested his chin in his hands, deep in thought. While Sukuna loved playing the role of a teacher, often barging into others' memories or near-death experiences to give impromptu lectures, that was due to his centuries of experience and tendency to meddle. When it came to Nen, however, Seer had no such luxury. His abilities were honed through trial, error, and a fair amount of getting beaten up by Sid. Nen abilities are usually tied to what you desire most. "Is there anything you deeply crave?" Seer asked casually. Mero frowned, thinking for a long while before shaking his head. "I'm not sure, sir. I don't think I've ever truly craved anything." The only thing he wished for was To see his reflection in Seer's eyes. To be acknowledged, respected, even valued by Seer, becoming his most trusted subordinate. Well, that's boring, the white-haired boy said, raising an eyebrow. His tone was indifferent, completely uninterested. Would the Hunter Association assign mentors to train newcomers? Someone to specifically teach Nen to beginners? Seer didn't have the patience for teaching. He wasn't some 1,000-year-old, lonely recluse trying to pass the time. Better to leave the job to the association, though he wasn't sure if they'd bother to teach someone who already had Nen. Go to bed. We'll continue tomorrow, Seer said, standing up and waving dismissively as he headed toward his reserved room without looking back. Once a fighter reached the 200th floor, they were given private accommodations. If all went well, Seer would reach the 200th floor tomorrow. And he didn't foresee any problems. Marrow watched as Seer disappeared into his room, then turned and walked in the opposite direction. The Heavens Arena offered training rooms, though they came at a cost. Marrow didn't mind spending some money. Though he didn't have much on hand, he was more than capable of earning a little extra if needed. Seer sat in his room, sorting through the thoughts that had consumed him during the day. Beyond the sudden realization about his compatibility levels, he had also been contemplating restrictions and vows for his Nen abilities. I've decided, Seer murmured. I want a degree of choice, at least the ability to pick one card myself. To make it fair, I'll change the rules. Instead of drawing 3 cards at a time, I'll allow myself to draw 5 cards at once. To gain the right to choose one card, 2 out of the initial 3 must always be debuff cards. In other words, the first 3 cards drawn would always consist of 2 debuff cards and 1 buff card. The 4th card will be completely random. It could be either a buff or a debuff, depending on luck. And I'll reserve the right to choose the 5th card, Seer added, his voice steady. That final card would be selected strategically based on the current lineup, choosing whether to prioritize buffs or debuffs. With this setup, the 5 cards drawn would result in 2 possible combinations. 1. 3 debuff cards and 2 buff cards, or 2. 3 buff cards and 2 debuff cards. Either way, Seer ensured that the 3-card stack would yield the maximum possible effect. Now, if these terms still weren't enough to balance the ability, then I'll add one more condition. To activate the effects, at least 2 of the cards must be used by the same person, and all 5 cards must be applied simultaneously. In other words, if Seer used 3 buff cards on himself, the remaining 2 debuff cards would have to be applied to a single other target. Additionally, the ability would now limit its target pool to 2 individuals, no more splitting cards between multiple people. Let's tack on another restriction while we're at it, Seer muttered, lying back on the bed, hands resting behind his head. After drawing 5 cards, the ability's cooldown will double. It'll go from 24 hours to 48 hours before I can draw again. But the duration of each card's effect will remain the same. Still 24 hours. Originally, he could draw 3 cards once a day, allowing him to draw 6 cards every 2 days. Under the new system, he would draw 5 cards every 2 days, effectively losing 1 card but ensuring the 3-card stack reached its full potential. This adjustment was efficient and fair. Not that he needed to draw cards every day. For Seer, this trade-off was minor, he barely felt it. And, truthfully, he had no interest in taking on a greater restriction. After all, he wasn't like Kurapika or Gon, driven by deep-seated grudges or overwhelming desperation. Nor was he a battle fanatic willing to sacrifice everything for ultimate power. Simply put, Seer lacked the obsession and determination required for higher-stakes vows. For now, this should be enough, Seer muttered to himself, closing his eyes. I'll figure out the rest later if I think of anything. With that, he drifted into thought, resting comfortably on the bed. Seer decided to hold off on drawing cards until after he woke up. If he drew them now and couldn't use them within half an hour, the effects would automatically apply to him, which felt like a waste. With his thoughts preoccupied by his Nen abilities and compatibility levels, he gradually drifted into sleep. The next morning, Seer stepped out of his room, well rested and ready to begin his day. "Good morning, sir," greeted Marlowe, who appeared to have stayed up all night and was already waiting outside his door. He held a neatly prepared breakfast in his hands, offering it to Seer with a low bow. Perhaps due to his upbringing in a mafia family, Marlowe was adept at knowing how to treat his superiors. He could read the subtlest of cues with precision. "Ah," Seer said lazily, taking the breakfast without a second thought. He didn't ask whether Marlowe had trained overnight or how he was doing, showing no interest whatsoever as he casually walked away. Marlowe hesitated for a moment, clearly wanting to follow him, but in the end, he turned in the opposite direction to head toward his own match on the lower floors. "The winner is Seer," the announcer declared with enthusiasm, raising their hands high. "Boring," Seer muttered under his breath, completely unfazed by yet another opponent knocked out cold and unable to continue. Without sparing the crowd or his fallen challenger a glance, he turned and walked off the stage. After a few casual matches, Seer had climbed to the 190th floor. Once past this threshold, matches started to take longer to arrange, leaving Seer with a lot of downtime between battles. To pass the time, he decided to check in on Marrow's progress. It seemed Marrow had already climbed to the 100th floor. For Seer, locating Marrow was effortless. Every individual's Nen signature was unique, and he simply followed its presence to find him. At the 99th floor C arena, Seer found Marrow in the middle of a match. Our contestants Marlowe and Bayasi are locked in a fierce exchange. Both fighters seem evenly matched, it's impossible to predict who will come out on top. The announcer shouted dramatically, their voice brimming with energy. Of course, Marrow is a newcomer to this floor, while Bayasi has reached the 99th floor 3 times before. Without a doubt, Bayasi is an experienced competitor. The subtle undertone of the announcer's words suggested that Bayasi had the higher odds of winning, almost as if encouraging the audience to bet accordingly. Seer's eyes fell on the stage, observing the fight. Marrow was entangled in close combat with his opponent, exchanging blows in a brutal and relentless struggle. It was no longer a simple exchange of punches, where one fighter threw a blow and then waited for the other to counter. Instead, the two were locked in a tightly contested, grappling skirmish. Marrow had certainly improved. When Seer first picked him up, the man couldn't even throw a proper punch on his own. But still. "What an ugly fight," Seer said aloud, his voice dripping with disdain. He made no effort to conceal his contempt. Chapter 54. Watching Marrow's fight with his opponent, Seer had only one thought. What is this? Did the two of you come straight out of a brawling basics drama troupe? Is brute force fistfighting all they know? The Heavens Arena doesn't even restrict the use of weapons, right? Even using a simple weapon would make the match far more entertaining than this mess. It was so ugly to watch that Seer felt an impulse to turn away. Still. Come to think of it, there are quite a lot of people in the audience, Seer murmured, raising an eyebrow and smiling with a hint of mischief. A crowd full of unlucky souls, huh? Might as well draw a card. Currently, Seer was standing alone in one of the arena's corridors. The match had already started, and the spectators were all seated inside. There wasn't anyone like him, leisurely arriving late. "Wheel of Law," he whispered. A glowing wheel of deep blue light appeared, hovering in the air before him. Reaching forward, Seer drew 3 cards. Reversed Strength. Effect: all abilities are weakened to a certain degree. Reversed Wheel of Fortune. Effect: causes bad luck. How unlucky? Well, that depends on fate. Upright Empress. Effect 1: when fighting male opponents, Attacks gain a bonus and are more likely to deal critical hits. The Empress card. Well, that's suitably regal. Now, let's see what the fourth card has to offer. The wheel spun briefly in the air and spat out a new card. Seer caught it in his hand and flipped it over. Upright High Priestess. Effect 1, restores a certain amount of energy. Effect 2, provides a sanity shield. Energy recovery? That's actually pretty useful, Seer mused. As for the second effect, it felt like something that would be handy when dealing with eldritch horrors. A sanity shield? Huh? Does that mean I won't lose sanity so easily? Less chance of going mad? Now for the fifth card, what to choose? He looked at the wheel. This time, the cards had stopped spinning, their faces clearly visible, awaiting his selection. Let's go with this one. Seer reached out and grabbed a card. Upright Chariot. Effect 1, allows the creation of any vehicle. Really? Any vehicle? Can I manifest that Golden Hero King's throne too? Seer chuckled to himself, thinking about the possibilities. Guess I'll have to test it out. So the 5 cards only take effect after being used on people. Seer muttered as he stepped out of the hallway with 5 cards in hand. He found a seat near the edge of the arena, close to the action. Marrow was still locked in a grueling back-and-forth fight with his opponent. Watching it made Seer involuntarily frown. Here, a little gift. Seer casually shoved 2 of the reverse debuff cards onto a random person in the crowd. The cards vanished the moment they made contact. The man stared blankly at his now empty hands, blinking in confusion. Huh? What did that white-haired kid give me? There's clearly nothing there. Hey, Marrow. Seer called out toward the ring. Marrow instinctively turned his head, only to get punched squarely in the face by his opponent. Wincing, he quickly pulled back to create distance, but his gaze remained fixed on Seer below the stage. Catch. Seer tossed 3 cards in Marlow's direction. Even mid-battle, Marrow chose to endure his opponent's attacks, reaching out to catch the items thrown at him. The moment the cards touched his hands, they vanished. Let's see how this plays out, Seer said with a bright grin as he threw the remaining 3 buff cards onto Marlow. Upright Empress. Upright High Priestess. Upright Chariot. The effects were immediate. The clothes Marlow was wearing transformed into an elegant white silk gown, off the shoulder, long-sleeved, and trailing dramatically on the ground. Apparently, either the High Priestess card or the Empress card included a wardrobe change as part of its effects. PFFT. Seer lifted a hand to cover his mouth, unable to hold back his laughter. Thank goodness I didn't use those cards on myself, or I'd be the one in a dress right now. The entire audience, along with the commentator, stared in stunned silence, jaws hanging open. HxH. Marrow has somehow managed a quick costume change right in the middle of the match. How did he do it? And what purpose could this transformation possibly serve? Let's wait and see. The commentator recovered quickly, maintaining professionalism as he narrated the bizarre turn of events. Across the ring, Marlow's opponent burst into hysterical laughter, clutching his stomach. Ha 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 ha. Do you think that by dressing up as a little girl, I'll go easy on you or something? The opponent sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. Marrow, now clad in a gown, stood frozen as he awkwardly touched the fabric of his skirt. It was high-quality material, exquisitely crafted, and surprisingly comfortable to wear. But it was still a dress. Is this punishment? He wondered, his expression dazed. Did I do something wrong? Or is this just a prank? If it was a prank, then maybe it means Lord Seer considers me one of his own? Yes, that must be it. A faint blush crept onto Marrow's cheeks as this realization dawned on him. Lord Seer only pulls pranks on people he considers his own. It has to be a sign. Seeing this, Mero was filled with renewed determination. Grabbing the hem of his dress to keep from tripping, he fought his opponent with just one hand. Unexpectedly, the fight became noticeably easier. When he landed a punch squarely on his opponent's face, watching the man spin 360 degrees in place and spit out 3 teeth, Marlowe stared at his own hand in disbelief. Did I just do that? Impossible. He knew his own strength perfectly well. Then, this change seemed to happen only after Seer showed up. Did Seer help me? It must be. Seer had finally accepted him as his subordinate. He needed to work even harder now. After Marlowe switched into women's clothing, his combat strength suddenly skyrocketed. Could this be some kind of new enhancement method? Or is it Mero's special technique? The commentator's voice was full of shocked disbelief. Let's congratulate Mero on his victory. The crowd erupted into cheers. So this is the Empress card's critical hit against males. Seer muttered, watching the opponent spit out blood and teeth after Mero's single punch. The male-targeted damage boost and the stacked effects of the 3 buff cards amplified Mero's otherwise average strike into something formidable. If used on someone stronger, the buffs would yield even more remarkable results. Speaking of which, there was also that unlucky guy. Seer shifted his gaze behind him. The man he had given 2 debuff cards to was now covered in instant noodle soup, with stray noodles draped over his head like limp, soggy curls. The man's entire demeanor radiated pure despair, as if a dark cloud hovered above him. Looks like he's had a string of bad luck. Just as Seer was observing this with amusement, another man appeared from behind the unfortunate soul. Seemingly oblivious, the newcomer walked straight into him. Hey! Are you blind? The unlucky man, already fed up with his misfortunes, grabbed the newcomer by the collar and shouted angrily. Who told you to have such a weak presence? If you want to be noticed, try being more noticeable. The newcomer shot back, slapping the unlucky man's hand away. His voice was sharp and menacing. What did you say? The unlucky man puffed out his chest and rammed it against the other. I said you should try having more presence. The other man stood his ground, chest bumping him right back. In an instant, the 2 men were brawling. Ah, conflict born of misfortune. Seer watched the chaos unfold as if it were a spectator sport, showing no guilt for orchestrating the entire scene. The unlucky man, of course, was still under the effects of the all-around debuff card. There was no way he could win. Seer watched as the other man pummeled the unlucky fellow before walking off with smug satisfaction. Seer couldn't help but clutch his stomach, laughing uncontrollably. Too tragic. Too tragic. My ability really is a lot of fun. Hey Hunter's mandatory cult break. Stretch your legs, hydrate, touch grass if possible, and whisper all hail Supreme Killua into the void. Now back to the fanfic grind. Blue heart emoji, high voltage sign emoji. Chapter 55. Congratulations, host. Compatibility with Satoru Gojo has increased by 5%. I wasn't even intentionally trying to raise it. Seer muttered with a hint of resignation upon hearing the system's notification. Well, it's still a good thing, after all. He had originally guessed that his strength was equivalent to 4 or 5 of Sukuna's fingers, but after realizing that the power of his abilities was directly tied to compatibility, his theory was completely overturned. Since then, he'd stopped bothering to estimate his own strength. Sir. Marlowe came bounding down from the arena, his face brimming with excitement as he approached the white-haired youth. Did you just help me earlier? Although it was more like I used you for an experiment, Seer thought, the results could technically be considered helping. After all, buff cards wouldn't produce any negative effects. Truly, I'm such a kind and generous person. Of course. The effect lasts for 24 hours, so make the most of it while you can, Seer said without a hint of guilt, even reaching out to pat Marrow on the shoulder with the casual air of a superior indulging a subordinate. "Yes, sir. I'll work twice as hard," Marlowe replied, his face flushing with determination. "Would contestants Seer and Tahan please proceed to the 199th floor Arena B?" The announcement echoed through the air. Seer glanced up toward the speakers and began walking toward the elevator. "Sir." Marrow quickly followed behind him. He was confident that Seer would finish this match long before his own competition was announced. The audience on the higher floors was significantly larger than those on the lower levels. Naturally, ticket prices and betting odds were also much higher. "Once I finish this match, I'll be on the 200th floor, Seer murmured as he lazily pushed his hair aside, looking up at the ring. His bangs had already grown to the length of his eyebrows. If they got any longer, they'd start blocking his vision, a hassle. "You've got this, sir." Marlowe's tone was filled with unwavering faith. Seer didn't react to the enthusiasm, casually waving his hand as he stepped toward the arena. Halfway there, he suddenly stopped and turned his head to address Marrow. "Oh, by the way, I also gave you a temporary ability to conjure a mode of transportation." He resumed walking without looking back, tossing out a final remark as he went. "By the end of today, make sure you conjure something that satisfies me." What? Seer had granted him the ability to conjure vehicles? But how was he supposed to use it? And what kind of transportation would Seer find satisfactory? Marrow panicked internally as he began brainstorming ways to manifest something impressive. Seer stood on the arena stage, not even sparing his opponent a glance. The moment the match began, as the announcer's voice declared the start of the fight, his opponent was sent flying out of the ring. No one had seen what Seer had done. They could only stare at the battered man hanging on the edge of consciousness, struggling to even move. The guy had clearly been hit by a black flash. "Looks like you're pretty lucky," Seer said nonchalantly, stepping down from the arena without waiting for the announcer to declare his victory. It wasn't until Seer left the stage that the announcer snapped out of his daze. "Seer is the winner. Let's all congratulate him on advancing to the 200th floor. I'm sure it won't be long before we see him competing at even higher levels." The host quickly recovered his composure, summoning the spirit of a diligent employee to salvage the situation. But wasn't there something he'd forgotten? What was it? The host watched the boy's retreating figure, racking his brain. He'd already qualified for the 200th floor. Wait. That's it. The 200th floor certificate. He hadn't handed it over yet. "Seer. Please wait. This is your certificate to the 200th floor." The host hurriedly ran down from the stage, chasing after him and pressing the certificate into the boy's hand. "Ah, I almost forgot," Seer said as he glanced at the certificate, nodding slightly. "For my matches on the 200th floor, the betting odds will definitely be high. Don't forget to place your bets on me." He said this casually while heading toward the elevator, addressing Marrow without looking back. This, after all, was the reason Seer had stuck to using only hand-to-hand combat in his earlier matches. Apart from having fun experimenting with Black Flash, he'd been deliberately hiding his true strength to appear as an average contestant. Letting everyone believe he was a mere brawler would make the perfect setup to rake in massive profits later. All this effort just to save up for that ridiculously overpriced collectible. He really was going all out. "Understood, sir," Marlowe replied with utmost seriousness. If Seer needed money this badly, perhaps Marrow should think of ways to earn more for him. Marrow's family did have several illegal ventures, and those operations held significant sums of liquid cash. With Seer's power, he could easily take over those funds. Yes, that's it. He'd find a way to lead Seer there and let him use the money as he pleased. Marrow stayed behind as the elevator doors closed, deep in thought about how to provide Seer with more financial resources. Once the elevator was out of sight, he turned and left. Without a certificate, he wouldn't be able to access the 200th floor contestant area. He had to keep pushing himself harder. The 200th floor was noticeably quieter compared to the lower levels. The moment Seer stepped out of the elevator, several gazes fell upon him. Should he pretend to be nervous or scared? But then again, acting for the benefit of the contestants seemed pointless. The odds were adjusted by the Heavens Arena officials, not these fighters. In other words, none of these contestants were of any use to him. If they weren't useful, then there was no need to waste time interacting with them. At one end of the 200th floor corridor was a registration booth. Every contestant who reached this level had to go there to register. On the sole corridor leading forward, small groups of people gathered. Some leaned casually against the walls with their arms crossed, while others sat cross-legged on the floor. What they all had in common, however, was the predatory glint in their eyes as they stared at Seer like hunters sizing up prey. And the unmistakable aura of Nen pressure radiating off them, as if they intended to give the newcomer a show of force. The Heavens Arena wasn't just a place for martial artists to hone their skills or make money. For those strong enough, it was also a hunting ground. Above the 200th floor, this atmosphere became even more pronounced. Yet, none of them made the first move. They just silently observed the newly arrived boy. A bunch of posturing clowns. Seer walked past one person after another, tossing out the comment with a tone of indifference. Even so, the people around him showed no reaction at all, they didn't even seem angry. Were they ninjas or something? How could they suppress their tempers this well? And usually, those who were that good at controlling themselves weren't exactly decent people. While silently mocking them in his mind, Seer arrived at the registration desk. "I'm here to register." "All right, please fill out this form." The woman behind the desk, seated with a bright smile, handed him the paperwork. It seemed like she didn't get many newcomers who were willing to talk because the moment Seer appeared, she started chatting non-stop, as if she had a backlog of words to release. The rules here require contestants to participate in at least one match every 90 days. If you don't compete within that time, you'll lose your qualification and be dropped back below the 200th floor. You'd have to fight your way back up again. Oh, and if you lose 4 consecutive matches, you'll also be demoted. But if you win 10 matches in a row on the 200th floor, you'll earn the right to challenge the floor masters. From the 230th to the 250th floor, there's one floor master per level. If you manage to become a floor master, you'll qualify for the biennial martial arts tournament hosted by the Heavens Arena. The winner gets to move into the 251st floor, the luxurious top-tier penthouse and a symbol of ultimate status. She rattled off the rules enthusiastically, her entire demeanor radiating pride at being an employee of the Heavens Arena. Seer glanced at her, and only one thought crossed his mind, a textbook corporate drone perfectly conditioned by her job. "Got it. Schedule a match for me as soon as possible," Seer replied, handing back the completed form. Without looking back, he added, "I imagine the people behind me are already getting impatient." Then he stood and walked away. Chapter 56. Behind Seer stood 3 distinct figures. The first was an extremely tall and equally obese man, so large he resembled a walking ball of flesh. The second was a mysterious figure draped in a black cloak, face concealed behind a mask, leaving not even a strand of hair visible. The third was a man whose stiff, permanent smile seemed welded onto his face, with his eyes nearly shut into narrow slits. All 3 were strikingly unique. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that every competitor on the 200th floor had a highly distinctive appearance. "We just happened to want to participate in a match as well," the man as large as a mountain of meat said, holding an oversized bag of chips that somehow looked comically small in his hands. His voice, however, didn't match his hulking appearance. Seer immediately thought of those internet trolls who would use a fake, feminine voice to lure unsuspecting people into infatuation before delivering a crushing blow by revealing their real selves. "Doesn't matter. You can all come at me at once," Seer sneered, his tone dripping with disdain. He didn't even bother to give them a proper look. His stunning blue eyes seemed incapable of acknowledging anyone, filled with indifference and a sense of superiority. "We don't stoop to bullying people," the smiling man said, his tone relaxed and nonchalant. As if targeting newcomers and matches wasn't a form of bullying. "This is just the initiation ritual every rookie has to go through," the mysterious cloaked figure chimed in. "I don't care," Seer replied as he walked toward the end of the corridor, eyes closed. The keyring of his newly obtained room key dangled lazily from his finger. "If you're not afraid of dying, feel free to come at me." With that offhand remark, he left without looking back. The 200th floor competitors stared at Seer's retreating figure until he completely disappeared from sight. Suddenly, the cloaked figure spoke up. "I like that kid's eyes. Bowie, make sure to gouge them out for me during the match." The massive man, Bowie, dismissed the suggestion outright. "No way. Gouging out people's eyes isn't my thing." "Sure, his eyes are beautiful, but I'm not interested in that kind of stuff," he said, munching on his chips. "If you like them so much, why don't you do it yourself?" The smiling man added, grinning as always. "TCH, the cloaked figure clicked his tongue in irritation. "But as for this rookie, let me take him first. My 90-day limit is almost up," Bowie announced. The other two didn't object. Above the 200th floor, the time between matches shortened due to the scarcity of newcomers, and because every battle left competitors with severe injuries. That was why each competitor had only 3 months to prepare. The more they gained, the more they had to pay. This principle held true in the Heavens Arena as well. "Hurry up and schedule our matches," Bowie said, handing his registration form to the woman at the desk. "Please wait patiently. The matches will be arranged as soon as possible," the staff member replied. Unlike her earlier enthusiasm with Seer, she kept her words short and professional when dealing with veteran 200th floor fighters. Because these competitors were all, in essence, extremely dangerous. The rooms on the 200th floor were at least 10 times larger than those on the lower floors. While the lower floors offered cramped 20 square meter spaces, the 200th floor rooms were luxurious 200 square meter suites. The difference in treatment was starkly evident in every detail. On the wall of the room hung a small electronic screen. Seer stared at the screen for a moment and saw a message pop up, a notification about his next match. The match was scheduled for January 25th. In other words, tomorrow. "Faster than I expected," Seer murmured, glancing at the notification, though it didn't seem to concern him much. He wondered briefly which of those 3 competitors would be his opponent. After washing up, Seer lay on the bed, his energy flowing continuously as he kept training even at rest. Thanks to the cooperation of the 6 eyes, he had complete mastery over the energy within his body. Without that synchronization, these eyes might have become more of a burden than a boon. In such a case, he might have considered gouging them out and finding another set. Come to think of it, I wonder if Marrow managed to materialize a vehicle using the chariot card, Seer thought, staring at the chandelier above. The card's effects lasted 24 hours. At this thought, Seer sat up, jumped out of bed, and rushed out the door. Better to check on him. If Marrow hadn't managed it yet, Seer would give him a thorough scolding. On the 120th floor, a blonde figure stood facing a wall, his brows tightly furrowed, his expression heavy with thought. What kind of vehicle would be worthy of Seer? Marrow had seen countless luxury cars, but even the most extravagant of them felt unworthy of Seer. After all, even his biological father rode in those luxury cars. If Seer's vehicle was on the same level as his father's, wouldn't that be an insult to Seer? Mero racked his brain but couldn't imagine a unique and extraordinary vehicle that could match Seer's stature. Suddenly, a voice sounded behind him. "Hey, you haven't materialized it yet?" Mero turned around to see the white-haired, blue-eyed youth standing there, an amused smirk on his face, the black markings on his skin adding an air of menace. "I deeply apologize, my lord," Mero said, bowing his head in shame. "I simply can't think of a vehicle that would be worthy of you." His tone was earnest and filled with sincerity. This guy really took his offhand comment seriously. In truth, Seer would have been fine with anything that looked cool and stylish. But since Mero was so serious about it. "Obviously, only the king's throne is worthy of me," Seer said with a straight face. "The celestial king's throne?" Mero asked, his voice laced with confusion. "What is that, my lord?" "A radiant vessel of gold and emeralds that soars through the skies, powered by solar energy. It can fly at high speeds, dive into the sea, and move freely underwater. On top of that, it boasts formidable offensive capabilities, armed with weapons like nuclear missiles." Seer listed off these features casually. "And nuclear missiles? Was that even something that could be installed on a vehicle?" But if Seer said it existed, then it must exist. The only problem was, how could this even be materialized? Could it even be materialized? Mero fell into deep thought. A radiant vessel likely meant a ship. A ship made of gold and emeralds, powered by solar energy, capable of flying. As he visualized the so-called king's throne in his mind, Mero failed to notice how quickly his energy was depleting. Seer watched the whole process unfold but didn't intervene, allowing Mero to continue. In the void, faint ripples and vortexes began to form, shimmering with tiny points of light. The next moment, the blonde figure collapsed onto the ground, and the vortex instantly dissipated. So, if one's strength is sufficient, it really might be possible to materialize Vimana? Seer mused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. The king's throne, or rather Vimana, was one of the treasures of a certain heroic king, Gilgamesh, in a particular type moon world. Mero, of course, couldn't materialize something like that. Even Seer himself likely couldn't materialize it right now. After all, it was a noble phantasm, something far beyond the realm of ordinary creation. But maybe one day, when his strength was great enough, he could give it a try. Chapter 57. The Priestess card had a mana regeneration effect, so Seer wasn't particularly worried about Mero being in any serious trouble. Once Mero woke up from his nap, he'd probably recover just fine. As for now, Seer glanced down at Mero, who was sprawled on the cold floor. He bent down, grabbed the back of Mero's collar, and dragged him to a corner. He propped Mero up against the wall to let him continue sleeping there. Leaving someone lying in the middle of the floor was just asking for them to get in the way. A corner was much better. As for taking him back to his room, Seer wasn't in the mood to be that considerate. At that moment, a staff member from the Heavens Arena hurried over, eyeing Seer with a wary look. Despite their caution, they politely asked, "Excuse me, contestant, may I ask what happened here?" It seemed the staff member suspected that the blonde-haired Mero had been killed by the white-haired boy standing before them. Such things weren't unheard of. In some cases, the scenes left behind were so gruesome that the staff had to clean them up themselves. "He passed out. Send him back to his room," Seer replied casually. Perfect. This staff member had essentially offered themselves up as free labor. Huh? The staff member looked at Seer, who was already walking away, then glanced back at the unconscious Mero. Ultimately, they decided to take care of the person left behind. The Empress card and the Priestess card had been put to good use, and even the Chariot card hadn't been wasted. It at least proved future possibilities. Starting tomorrow, the contestants should all be Nen users, Seer murmured to himself as he walked away, leaving Mero entirely forgotten. Their life energy isn't bad, but to say they're exceptionally strong. Not really. Their abilities likely don't even match Hisoka's. Hisoka's record is 11 matches, 8 wins, and 3 losses. Those 3 losses were all forfeits because he didn't compete within the 90-day limit. Is that guy really so busy? Or is he just running around looking for opponents all over the world? By the rules, it takes 10 wins to become a floor master, so Hisoka hasn't made it to floor master yet, huh? I wonder how strong the floor masters are. Seer muttered as he strolled casually, his footsteps deliberately loud, like he wanted to draw attention. Should he play around with the title of floor master for a bit? Then, if he ever bumped into Hisoka again, he could thoroughly mock him. You mean you're not even a floor master in Heaven's Arena? Just go home. You're nothing but a useless adult now. PFFT, ha 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 ha. Seer couldn't help but imagine the scene, how hilarious it would be to taunt Hisoka like that. Would Hisoka freeze on the spot, turning into a statue like in the anime, or maybe make that dumb, wide-eyed, pouty face? Bending over with his arms around his stomach, Seer shook with laughter, completely ignoring the curious stares from people around him. Without a care, he walked straight to his room, shut the door, and left all those meaningful glances behind. The next morning, Mero woke up stiffly in his bed, rubbing the back of his head as he tried to piece together his lost memories. Yesterday. He failed. His face instantly went blank. He hadn't been able to manifest the vehicle Seer had wanted. But what baffled him more was waking up in his room after passing out on the street. Could it be? Seer was worried about him lying out there and getting stepped on. Was Seer actually concerned about him? But he had let Seer down. Realizing this, Mero clung to the wall in anguish, repeatedly banging his head against it. I'm so useless. And now, an exciting match awaits us. The rising superstar Seer faces off against Bowie in the 220th floor arena. Super rookie Seer climbs straight to the 200th floor in his first visit to Heaven's Arena. What an extraordinary feat. Meanwhile, his opponent, Bowie, already has 2 wins under his belt on this floor. The announcer enthusiastically hyped up the upcoming showdown. The 200th floor arena was massive, capable of seating tens of thousands of spectators. The design was noticeably more luxurious compared to the lower floors, with materials that were clearly much sturdier. The towering mountain of meat Bowie was already on the stage, while his 2 companions from yesterday sat in the innermost section of the audience. But the other contestant was nowhere to be seen. The crowd was growing restless, jeers filling the air. That brat must be scared. Bet he chickened out. Probably ran back home crying to his mommy. Ha ha ha. If he doesn't show up soon, we want our money back. The growing commotion forced the announcer to step in and calm the crowd. Our contestant Seer has not yet arrived at the arena. With 10 minutes left until the match begins, will he appear on time? Or is he too afraid to face Bowie, choosing instead to avoid the fight altogether? Stay tuned to find out. And of course, refunds are out of the question, the announcer added with a cheerful smile, wiping the sweat from her brow. Seer, meanwhile, slept soundly until 10 minutes before the match. Only then did he lazily open his eyes, get up, wash, and change at his usual unhurried pace. Right as the announcer began counting down to the start of the match, Seer strolled onto the stage. Our contestant Seer has arrived. He's made it to the stage right on time. The announcer, who had been desperately stretching the commentary, let out a sigh of relief and eagerly announced his arrival. Without further ado, let the match begin, she declared, her excitement spilling over. The audience in the stands, having gone from jeering to outright howling, seemed more hyped than if they were the ones about to fight. Kill. 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 Crush him, Bowie. Beat that fatso. Go, rookie kid. The cheers were split into 2 camps, each side fervently wishing for the other fighter to be knocked out, or worse. It was obvious they had bet a lot of money on this match. Seer glanced at the enormous man across the arena. Bowie's face was so buried in layers of fat that his features were squished together, making it impossible to discern his expression. "Not going to attack me?" Bowie asked, his tone brimming with anticipation. It was as if he wanted to be hit. "Hey! Go ahead, kid. Once you attack me, you'll only feel despair. Everyone who tries ends up hopeless in the end." Something was off. What kind of nen ability did this guy have? Seer's curiosity piqued. A thin, green aura of nen enveloped Bowie's entire body. "Are you a masochist?" Seer remarked, standing in place. With a subtle motion of his index finger, he unleashed an invisible slash toward the green aura. The attack was deflected. Only 30% of its power at 30% compatibility, Seer thought. But it was strange. His slash, which could injure someone like HxH, couldn't penetrate Bowie's aura. This guy's defense was far superior to HxH's in that regard. A defense-specialized type, huh? Interesting. In a blink, Seer teleported behind Bowie, landing a punch aimed at the back of his head. But Bowie only tilted his head slightly, showing no signs of injury. The nen around his body is evenly distributed, with no weak spots in his defense. But maintaining this kind of defense must come at a cost, right? Seer observed quietly. Bowie remained stationary, making no move to attack. Was it because of his massive size, limiting his mobility? To the onlookers, though, Seer standing there deep in thought looked like he had already run out of options. "Ha ha 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 ha," Bowie bellowed, clutching his enormous belly in laughter. "Come on, kid, bring it. You can't break through my defense. My defense is the strongest." "Does your ability have any other uses?" Seer suddenly asked, fixing his sharp blue gaze on Bowie. "What?" Bowie thought, baffled. What kind of question is that? Who in their right mind would casually reveal their ability to an opponent? "Why don't you guess?" "I'm not telling you what my ability is," Bowie retorted internally, now convinced Seer was a strong but somewhat dim-witted rookie. Did this kid seriously think he could end the fight with just his fists, like against those weaker opponents below the 200th floor? Not answering, huh? Well, that was expected. This wasn't a world where revealing your technique would somehow make it stronger. But then I'll make you show me, Seer said with a smirk, dark blue and black energy swirling around his arm. Chapter 58. The grin on Bowie's face vanished, replaced by a serious expression. Suddenly, his enormous body moved with an agility that seemed impossible for someone his size. So his size isn't a burden after all. He can move. Seer thought, though to him, Bowie's movements looked like a rapidly advancing mountain of flesh. When Seer landed a punch on Bowie's stomach, the force was immediately rebounded, forcing him to take a step back. A stray thought popped into his head. This guy's belly could totally be used as a trampoline. Seer tilted his head to dodge Bowie's nen-coated fist and retreated lightly with nimble steps. Sometimes he would sidestep, other times shift his head or shoulders, avoiding all of Bowie's attacks with ease. "Damn it," Bowie growled, pulling back his fist and glancing at the audience. "Catch." A man in the crowd grinned and tossed a knife onto the stage. "The audience has thrown Bowie a weapon," the announcer immediately explained to the crowd. Of course, as everyone knows, this is not against the rules. The Heavens Arena allows the use of weapons, any kind of weapon is permitted. Even if a weapon is thrown in mid-match by the audience, it's perfectly legal, as long as no third person steps onto the stage. She added, educating the spectators about the tournament's rules. Seer remained still, showing no intention of stopping Bowie from picking up the weapon. Once Bowie grasped the knife, he coated it with nen, making the already sharp blade gleam even more dangerously. As he swung it, flashes of cold silver light filled the arena. Seer, with his graceful movements, seemed as though he was performing a dance. Occasionally, he flicked his fingers, sending out invisible slashes that no one could see. The arena floor was soon marked with deep diagonal gashes, evidence of Seer's precise and deadly strikes. Is deflection also part of his ability? Seer pondered as he dodged an incoming slash. The icy blade reflected half of his face for a fleeting moment, eyebrows raised and his pale blue eyes carrying a cool indifference. According to the rules of the hunter world, no matter how strong someone's defense is, there must be an upper limit, right? So where exactly is the limit of his defense? With that thought, Seer leapt into the air, landing on the tip of Bowie's swinging knife, crouching there with perfect balance. Take this seriously, rookie, Bowie roared in frustration as he swung his long blade with force, flinging the white-haired youth into the air. Your ability is kinda like a turtle shell, Seer remarked as he spun midair, landing gracefully and effortlessly. He even found the time to mock Bowie further, ensuring his taunts hit their mark. The arena was littered with cracks, damage caused by Seer's attacks being deflected off Bowie's body and ricocheting elsewhere. If this is all your ability can do, it's way too boring. Seer shook his head, delivering a verbal jab that immediately shattered Bowie's composure. You think my ability is boring? This is a super strong ability. You little punk. Bowie, now completely enraged, moved faster than ever. His massive frame charged across the cracked arena as he relentlessly swung his blade at Seer. Come on, put some effort into it. Didn't eat breakfast or something? Seer's mocking tone became even more dismissive as he casually tucked both hands into his pockets. Come on, bro. You're so close to hitting me. I'll play with you as long as it takes for you to land a hit, Seer added cheerfully, his voice light and full of sunshine as he leapt several meters into the air with a gentle push from his toes. His taunts, however, carried the full weight of provocation. Hill. He's amazing at trash talking, the announcer stammered, struggling to keep up with the unusual fight. Never before had she narrated a match like this. Most fighters were silent and stoic, rarely uttering a word, let alone this many biting insults. Die already, Bowie bellowed, gripping his blade as he jumped high into the air after Seer. Despite his massive size, with Nen reinforcement, Bowie was capable of leaping several, even dozens of meters into the air. Reaching Seer's height, his expression twisted into a smug grin as he swung his blade downward. You're dead, rookie. Bye-bye. Seer effortlessly dodged the incoming blade with a sidestep. In the same instant, black and blue energy wrapped around his right leg. He kicked forward, his foot colliding with Bowie's large stomach. The black and blue energy seemed to clash with something, creating an explosive effect. Bowie was sent hurtling downwards, crashing into the arena floor with a heavy impact that left a crater. Seer glanced at the fallen opponent, his foot tingling from the soft yet springy sensation of Bowie's stomach. It really does feel like a trampoline, he mused. Then, his gaze sharpened. Looks like I might have broken through his defense just a little. I could feel my kick actually landing on his stomach. The black flash's critical hit is 2.5 times the original force. Ah, so that's how it is. This guy's defensive limit is right there. Not so impressive after all. And it seems like, for this entire time, he doesn't have any other abilities. Did this guy really pour all his energy into developing his defense? He's not that coward girl from a certain universe who essentially did the same thing. If that's true, how boring. That kind of hurt. Bowie muttered, rubbing his fat-covered stomach. He had no idea that Seer had already figured out the upper limit of his defense. To be fair, even Bowie himself didn't know what his defensive limit was. Little punk. Bowie glared upward in frustration, his eyes fixed on the figure still hovering in the air. If this is all your defense can manage. The white-haired, blue-eyed youth leaned forward, bending slightly as he looked down at Bowie from above. Curse technique lapse, blue. Maximum output. Black and blue energy gathered in Seer's palm, forming a dense, glowing orb. The immense gravitational pull forced everyone in the audience to grab onto the nearest fixed object, fearing they too might be dragged toward the arena. "The game's about to end," Seer said with a calm smile. His fingers twitched slightly, sending the energy sphere hurtling downward. The moment the black and blue energy touched Bowie, a massive explosion erupted on the stage. The already damaged arena was obliterated, leaving nothing but a flattened surface. The blast even extended to the walls below the closest audience seating, blowing a massive hole into the structure. Yet, despite the chaos, no one in the audience was injured. When the dust finally settled, Bowie's body was embedded deep into the wall beneath the audience seating. His clothes were in tatters, his body covered in wounds and blood. His so-called invincible defense had been shattered. "Bowie? Bowie?" The scorekeeper ran to his side, calling his name repeatedly. After checking his condition, they turned to the announcer and shook their head, signaling that Bowie could no longer continue the fight. Although the match was technically scored in rounds, if one contestant couldn't continue, scoring was unnecessary. Bowie is incapacitated. Hill has broken through Bowie's previously impenetrable defense. "Let's congratulate Hill on his victory," the announcer declared with excitement, her voice barely audible over the roaring cheers of the crowd. Seer walked leisurely off the stage. As he passed by two figures in the audience, he stopped, turned his head, and said to them, "Don't forget to hand in your registration forms." Chapter 59. After the white-haired boy said those words, he left the arena, leaving the two men behind. "Congratulations, host. Character compatibility has each increased by 5%. Now it's 30% for Gojo Satoru and 35% for Sukuna. The skill power should have also increased accordingly. But the 6 eyes. For now, it's more of a burden than a benefit to him." The man in the black robe and the man with squinted eyes exchanged looks, neither saying a word at first. "He wants us to register just because he said so. That's spineless," the man in the black robe said, trying to sound tough. "Exactly, I agree." The squinting man nodded. "I love saying no to arrogant little brats like him," the black-robed man added. The squinting man nodded again. "Same here." As Bowie was carried away on a stretcher by the Heavens Arena staff, the stretcher passed by the two men. Bowie weakly raised a trembling finger and said feebly, "Avenge. Avenge me." After forcing out those words, his head lolled to the side, and blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. He was clearly unconscious again. Out of a faint sense of camaraderie, the two men fell silent for a moment. "Bowie is the strongest in defense among us. If even his defense couldn't withstand that kid's final attack, there's no way we could," the squinting man analyzed. Bowie was a specialist in defense, dedicating all his efforts to perfecting it without developing any other abilities. Yet even he couldn't hold up. If they went up against Seer, they wouldn't just fail to avenge Bowie, they'd likely end up in the medical ward alongside him. Luckily, in the Heavens Arena, medical services for injuries sustained in matches above the 200th floor are free. "Anyway, my next match isn't for a while, so there's no rush," the black-robed man said as he headed for the exit. The squinting man followed without hesitation. Not a single one of them suggested checking on Bowie. The fragility of their friendship was on full display. Seer stepped into the elevator, leaning into the corner as he muttered to himself, "How boring. Once the turtle shell is broken, there's nothing else. Single-purpose abilities are the dullest." He had hoped for something surprising. At the very least, Bowie could have developed some creative ways to use his abilities. "It feels like even you, elevator lady, are stronger than my opponent," Seer remarked, his gaze landing on the elevator operator. It wasn't entirely a joke, her life energy was indeed stronger than Bowie's. Ha ha ha, what nonsense. You flatter me too much. The elevator lady covered her face with one hand, laughing brightly, her tone tinged with pride. This newcomer, he's not only good-looking but also has great taste. It's a shame you're not a contestant. The white-haired boy sighed. The elevator lady crossed her arms over her chest and declared seriously, "It's forbidden to harm staff members." "I would never think of such a thing, I swear," Seer replied nonchalantly. Just then, the elevator doors opened, and Seer stepped out. "Liar. I'm sure you thought about it," the elevator lady called out, still inside, her tone full of doubt. Seer didn't look back or respond. The elevator doors closed, cutting off her line of sight. Surely, there must be other contestants with more interesting abilities. He mused as he walked toward the registration counter. From then on, Seer didn't encounter anyone recklessly releasing murderous intent or pressure. It was as if he had already gained the recognition of others. But Seer didn't need that kind of recognition. He preferred how things were at the start, when everyone came to challenge him. That would have been more entertaining. At the registration counter. "Oh my, this contestant. I heard you won your match. Congratulations, congratulations." The woman at the registration counter greeted him with a bright smile as soon as she saw him. "So, what brings you here this time?" she asked, her cheerful tone turning slightly curious. The white-haired, blue-eyed boy pulled out a chair and sat down, crossing his legs in a languid posture. "Anyone challenging me? If so, arrange the match as soon as possible," he added casually, his tone light but impatient. His attitude was contradictory. On the surface, he didn't seem to care, but his insistence to get it done quickly suggested otherwise. "Nope, no challenges at the moment." The woman smiled. "You still have 90 days of preparation time. If you're eager to compete, you can issue challenges yourself, pick your opponent, and agree on the time and venue," she explained. "Once the opponent accepts, we'll arrange the match immediately." Her professionalism was clear, though her tone carried a hint of exasperation. How could someone be this eager to fight? Most contestants would rest until the deadline before even thinking about registering for a match. "Huh? Why would I challenge someone?" Seer raised his eyebrows high, his face full of arrogance. Issuing a challenge was tantamount to putting oneself in an inferior position. Only the weak needed to challenge the strong. Did people like Gojo Satoru or Sukuna ever challenge others? Of course not. Because they were the strongest. It was always others who wanted to challenge them. And often, because of the fear of their strength, most wouldn't even dare to issue a challenge. In that case, you can simply submit your registration form, and we'll match you with an opponent, the woman suggested. Which, of course, would mean being matched with some boring contestant. Forget it. Seer drooped his eyes, his face filled with disinterest and dejection as he got up to leave. At the betting window. Might as well check how much money Marrow's made, he thought. If they'd gathered enough to hit the 1 billion mark, he could buy the storage curse and leave the Heavens Arena altogether. Hisoka, after all, stayed here to nurture opponents, treating it like a hunting ground. But Seer wasn't interested in raising opponents and waiting for them to grow stronger. To him, that was a waste of time. When Seer arrived at the betting window, he found Marrow standing in line. He glanced at the upcoming match. Contestants. Castro, male, 4 wins, 1 loss. Rico, male, 2 wins, 2 losses. Castro was a tall, thin man with long, straight, white hair, while Rico was a muscular dark-skinned man with amber eyes. Though their names weren't exactly inspiring. Castro. That name sounds familiar, Seer murmured as he glanced at the avatar displayed above. Hearing the familiar voice, Marrow, who was still waiting in line, quickly turned around with an excited expression. "Sir." "Ah, Mero," the white-haired boy responded lazily, his mind still preoccupied with why the name felt familiar. Suddenly, a light bulb went off in his brain, and he figured out the answer. If memory served, this guy was one of HxH's toys. However, perhaps due to the overly gory or violent nature of the story arc, Seer hadn't seen that episode on certain streaming platforms. It seemed to have been censored, like it was wiped clean by some divine force. But he had come across some fan edits posted by creators online. Apparently, Castro had once fought against HxH. In a way, HxH was even his mentor, having baptized him. In the context of the Heavens Arena, this likely referred to an elder opening the aura nodes of a newcomer. Ultimately, Castro lost to HxH. But HxH spared his life, clearly treating him as a toy. As for what Seer remembered from the edited clips, well, it seemed HxH wasn't satisfied with how his toy turned out later on and ended up killing him outright. Chapter 60. Mero also glanced up at the two avatars on the screen, then turned back and asked, "Sir, do you know him?" "Not personally, but I've heard of him," Seer replied with a playful smile tugging at his lips. "He's one of HxH's targets." The white-haired, blue-eyed boy continued, his tone both amused and dismissive. "If I had to say, HxH probably ranks him and me in the same category in his mind." "What? How dare he compare himself to you, sir?" Mero clenched his fists in anger. That HxH really has terrible judgment. To think he could look at anyone else after knowing you? What poor taste. Right? I think so too, Seer nodded in agreement. The very idea that HxH might place him in the same toy box as others irritated him to no end. "Couldn't you at least set up a special box for me in your mind, HxH?" he grumbled inwardly. Still, his hand betrayed his annoyance as he pointed to Castro's avatar and said to Mero, "Bet on him to win." "Understood," Mero replied after a moment of hesitation. He had already been planning to bet on Castro, as he believed the man's strength was superior to his opponent's. "After all, money doesn't lie," Seer remarked, patting Mero on the shoulder. Mero always trailed a few steps behind Seer and habitually bowed his head slightly, making it easy for Seer to reach his shoulder. Perfect. If Mero stood upright and proud beside him, it would feel like he was being looked down on, completely unacceptable. At the moment, Seer was only 163 centimeters tall, but with Sukuna's original height of over 2 meters and Gojo's towering 190 plus cm, he figured he'd grow quite a bit. By the time he hit 16, he'd likely be around 180 centimeters tall. When that happened, he would be the one looking down on others. "How much money do we have now?" Seer abruptly changed the subject. 450 million, Mero calculated in his head and replied. Castro's odds weren't high, in fact, they were incredibly low. Betting on him to win wouldn't yield much profit, even if they were right. And there were still taxes and fees to account for. Taxes. No matter the world, they always existed. Only that much? Seer muttered, tugging at the corner of his mouth. But he knew better than to complain. Oh well, considering they had only been at the Heavens Arena for a few days and already made 200 million, it wasn't bad. Even if they were still halfway short of the 10 billion needed to buy Storage Curse. All he wanted was a portable storage space, nothing extravagant. My apologies. Mero instinctively murmured. Let's go watch that guy's match, Seer said, dropping the subject. He purchased 2 tickets, and they made their way to the arena where Castro's fight was about to begin. The long-haired white-haired man and the dark-skinned, amber-eyed man stood face to face. As the announcer declared the match's start, both fighters sprang into action. They're so fast. I can't see a thing, Mero muttered, his eyes glued to the stage. After a while, he gave up and shifted his gaze to the slow-motion replay on the overhead screen. Try channeling your aura into your eyes, Seer said nonchalantly, leaning on the railing in front of him without looking back. Aura can be directed to any part of your body. You can also imbue it into objects. When you infuse your will, or rather, your intent, into the aura, you can grant those objects the desired effect. It's a very subjective and will-driven ability. Seeming to indulge in the role of a teacher, Seer explained, though it was clear he wasn't particularly adept at it. Fortunately, Mero was a diligent student. Understood, the blond youth nodded, signifying his comprehension. He refocused on the arena, and for the first time, he could actually follow what was happening, at least to some extent. Even so, he still couldn't quite understand it. Sweat began to bead on his forehead from the effort. On the stage, Castro appeared in front of his opponent and unleashed a technique, Tiger Fang Fist, severing half of the opponent's arm. How? How did he do that? He's so fast. I couldn't catch his movements at all, Mero muttered, his brows furrowed in frustration. You're focusing on the wrong thing, Seer replied lazily. It looks like he's attacking from the front, but he's actually striking from the side. After a brief pause, he added it in an indifferent tone, he's got an extra pair of hands. That jogged his memory. He recalled watching clips of Castro's fight with Hisoka. One of the comments lamented the former's wasted potential. Apparently, despite being an enhancement type, Castro had developed Double Shadow Clone, an ability more aligned with conjuration. This deviation significantly weakened his natural strength as an enhancer. In other words, he could have been much stronger. An extra pair of hands? Mero was taken aback. That's what happens with self-taught ability users, Seer remarked casually. No systematic training in Nen techniques, no proper guidance. If he'd just taken the hunter exam, he wouldn't have ended up like this. After all, obtaining a hunter license would have given him access to the association's resources, including a mentor to teach the basics of Nen. Hisoka probably just opened Castro's aura nodes and left him to figure out the rest. For an enhancer to develop a clone technique, it's no wonder people see it as unconventional. Seer turned to Mero and offered some advice, remember to stick to the path that suits you best. Mero wasn't particularly strong, and if his Nen development veered off course, he'd be wasted potential, just like Castro. I'll do my best. Mero vowed earnestly. As a transmuter, he wondered what kind of ability would be most fitting for him. From what Seer had mentioned, Hisoka was also a transmuter. What exactly was Hisoka's ability like? The match on the stage ended quickly. Castro defeated his opponent with ease. Seer could tell that he hadn't even used his full strength. But boring, Seer muttered, losing any interest in fighting Castro. The clone ability relied entirely on catching opponents off guard to land critical hits. But against someone with 6 eyes like Seer? Such abilities were entirely ineffective. Any match between them would be dull and over in no time. Castro's power would crumble the moment his clone technique was exposed. And then there was that guy who fought with spinning tops, what was his ability called? Dancing tops? His entire strategy revolved around imbuing aura into the tops and letting them attack his opponents. If Seer fought him, the tops wouldn't even touch him. Yet another uninspiring match. How boring. Let's make 500 more million and leave this place, Seer muttered as he left the stands, Mero trailing behind him. The two spent the rest of the day placing bets. With the 6 eyes ability, Seer always picked seemingly unknown fighters who, from his perspective, showed significant potential. These underdogs had the highest odds. The higher the floor level, the lower the odds, unless the skill disparity was so blatant that even the audience could see it. In the massive Heavens arena, thousands of new fighters showed up daily. Seer made 2 billion in a single day just by betting. That evening, Seer and Mero sat on a couch, calculating their total assets. So now we have nearly 700 million. In a couple more days, we can leave and head somewhere else, Seer declared. As long as the Heavens Arena didn't ban him from betting, of course. He could already imagine them putting up a sign with his photo and the words "This person is banned from betting." Surely a place this big wouldn't be that petty, right? After all, 6 Eyes was a passive ability, he couldn't turn it off even if he wanted to. How could that be considered cheating? And with that, Seer cheekily ended his day. Chapter 61. One day later, in the same corner of the lounge, Seer sat alone on the sofa, calculating his assets once again. Finally, I've scraped together $1 billion. Seer spread out his hands and leaned back, sighing in relief. It hadn't been that long, really, but earning this much felt like a monumental task. System, I'm ready to spend. Give me the storage curse. Without hesitation, he spent the entire amount. The money barely lingered in his possession for even a minute. Storage curse has been issued. On the empty space beside Seer appeared a 1.3-meter long creature. Its entire body was a segmented mass of dark purple and black, its protruding eyes giving it a dopey look. It resembled a giant caterpillar, awkward, grotesque, and strange. Yet no one around him seemed to notice its presence. Come on, Seer said, patting his thigh to beckon it closer. The caterpillar-like creature raised the upper half of its body. Its massive head, with those protruding, vacant eyes, stared at Seer. Its sausage-like mouthparts wiggled as it opened its mouth. Mama. There it was again, that familiar feeling. Why did it call everyone Mama? Being called Mama felt so weird. But since it was storage curse, Seer decided to let it slide. Ugly and slow as it was practical. Besides, this was how this thing behaved in the original anime too. Seer decided to tolerate it. Alright, hurry up and get on, Seer urged it. Storage curse slowly crawled forward, inch by inch, until it climbed onto Seer's body, wrapping itself around him in 2 loops. Its tail coiled around his waist while its head rested on his shoulder. Just like how it looked in the anime, in that one scene with Toji. Seer grabbed his backpack with one hand and used the other to pry open storage curse's mouth. He shoved the bag inside. Glug glug, the creature made swallowing noises as it devoured the backpack. Good boy, Seer said, patting its head like one would a dog. He stood up and began walking out of the corner. If anyone used Gyo, enhancing their vision with aura, they would see him surrounded by a thick, ominous aura of dark purple energy. Come to think of it, do I look like some kind of malevolent energy user to others now? Seer mused as he walked. Of course, that would only be the case if those people were aware of what malevolent energy was. Nen was life energy, while malevolent energy was its opposite. If anything, it was closer to cursed energy. Wasn't malevolent energy born from anger and hatred? Cursed energy also came from negative emotions, right? But malevolent energy is only a setting from the movie series. I wonder if it exists in the real Hunter x Hunter world. If it does exist, then Seer could indeed call himself a malevolent energy user. This one. He walked to the merchandise section of the Heavens Arena and casually pointed to a whole shelf of items. I'll take all of these. Have them delivered to my room. He nonchalantly instructed the Heavens Arena staff. After all, it wasn't ideal to shove things into storage curse's mouth in front of everyone. Though, to the ordinary person, it would just seem like he was putting things into thin air. Of course, sir. The staff nodded with a cheerful smile, unfazed by his request. Clothes, food, toiletries. After getting the SE, Seer turned into something of a nouveau riche, going on a shopping spree. Or rather, after meeting the conditions to have a personal space, the hoarding instinct deep within his rabbit soul had awakened. He bought a ton of things, ensuring that, even if he ever ended up stranded on a deserted island, he wouldn't lack food or clothes. Afterward, he happily patted SC's big head. Back in his room, however, he found Mero standing at the door. His face was bruised, yet his excitement was impossible to hide. "Master! I figured out how to develop my abilities," Mero exclaimed, voice full of excitement. "Look," he extended his right hand, and suddenly frost appeared in the air. "Ice?" Seer raised an eyebrow. Well, well, well. You really are the Ryomen of the Hunter x Hunter world. How did you come up with using ice?" Seer asked, feigning interest. "Because I fought an opponent from the 200th floor today." Mero scratched his face, a little discouraged. After learning how to use Nen and actively attack, fights below the 200th floor became very easy for him. Today was his first match on the 200th floor. "My opponent was a guy who used a spinning top. At first, I got hit by the top a lot, and couldn't even get close to him. Then I thought, what if the tops didn't move? At first, I was thinking about using cement, but I didn't know how, so I came up with the idea to freeze the tops. That way, they wouldn't move anymore." Mero shared his thought process during the match. "And then? Did you win?" Seer impatiently interrupted, asking for the result. "I lost." Mero lowered his head, his shoulders slumping in disappointment. His idea was good, and he did manage to pull it off, but as for the battle result, he successfully froze his opponent's top, but when he got close to attack the opponent directly, the opponent surprisingly started spinning just like the top. And his ability couldn't freeze the opponent. So, the result of the first match: he lost. As expected. Seer spoke knowingly. "I knew you'd lose, so I bet on your loss." Mero looked stunned. "Ah. Should I say, as expected of you, Master? You really have the ability to foresee things. Or should I say it's all my fault for being so useless, and you never thought I would win?" Don't worry, don't worry. Not long ago, you got beaten up by exam candidates who didn't even know Nen. Now you've made it to the 200th floor. It won't be long before these guys get knocked down by you. Then you'll realize, Seer waved his hand indifferently, lazily lifting the corner of his lips, "are super weak." He lowered his brows, speaking with disdain. "So cool. That self-confident, natural arrogance. As expected of Seer. So cool." Mero nodded eagerly, eyes sparkling. "Let's go. From now on, just keep focusing on developing your ability," Seer said in a calm tone. "No need to stay here any longer." He entered the room and started feeding things into SC's mouth. "Not staying?" Mero asked, somewhat confused. "Because there's no more money to be made here." Seer's expression was slightly complicated. When he went to place bets today, the staff behind the counter had said to him, "I hope I won't see you here again next time. You should stop cheating with your abilities." They probably couldn't see his Six Eyes ability, and they probably thought his Nen ability worked in this way. After that, the staff drew a simple sketch right in front of him, a little figure with white hair, blue eyes, and black tattoos. They then stuck it on the wall next to the window. It said, "This person is banned from approaching." That meant he'd been blacklisted by the staff at that window. Clearly, it wasn't an official ban, but rather a personal action from the staff. After all, the notice was drawn by them on the spot. The Heavens Arena staff were really free-spirited. Just a few days ago, he'd seen an elevator girl beat up two guys who were trying to flirt with terrible pickup lines. Chapter 62. "I see. I understand now. I'll go pack up right away," Mero said, then ran back to his room without asking another question. Bounty hunters and contract hunters are probably the quickest ways to make money, right? At least they're both transaction-based hunters. They get paid by the client for doing a job, simple to say, more money, less work, fast earnings. Seer continued feeding things to SC while analyzing his job prospects. But contract hunters are specifically employed by the rich. Seer clicked his tongue impatiently as he spoke. If they were rich, he wouldn't necessarily listen to them. If the client spoke to him in a commanding tone, he'd definitely kill the so-called employer. Contract hunting was not a viable path for him. As for bounty hunters, you just take the bounty and capture the wanted criminals. And the reward for living or dead criminals seemed to be the same? Yeah, it's easy. Bounty hunting it is. Seer casually decided on his target for the near future. 100 billion. Considering the earnings from his past life work as an influencer and cosplayer, getting paid for promotion deals and attending conventions, even if he worked tirelessly to earn $1 million every year, it would still take him 100 years to save up 100 billion. After all, his fans were mostly on platforms like Video App, but not so much on a lettered site, where it wasn't as lucrative. Of course, if he lived off his parents, he wouldn't need to work so hard. After stuffing all the items he bought into SC's body, Seer sat down in front of the computer in his room, pulled out his hunter license, and swiped it to go online. The security at the Heavens Arena was quite good. If he were using a computer outside, he might have to worry about people finding out his address or searching for his information, coming after him to steal his hunter license. But at the Heavens Arena, there was no need to worry about that. Let's see what bounties are available on the Hunter website. He opened the website that only hunters could access, going to the bounty section and scanning through the announcements. He ignored the B, C, and D level bounties and directly clicked on the A level ones. As he scrolled down, what caught his eye was the Phantom Troops wanted notice. Phantom Troop, 10 billion each, dead or alive, must provide proof of identity. Seer read the note on the bounty, his expression growing excited. There were 13 members in the Phantom Troop, and at 10 billion each, that would be 130 billion. After buying his desired item from the shop, there would still be 30 billion left. However, the Phantom Troop was usually scattered around the world, making it hard to capture them all at once. Only a few of the original members would be found together in Meteor City. Seer thought about this and pulled out his phone to call Pampas, who was in Meteor City. The call connected quickly, but no sound came from the other side. Pampas, do you know where the troop is? Seer's voice was barely able to contain his excitement. The strange emotion was even felt on the other end by Pampas, who found it a bit odd. Back in Meteor City, this kid had shown no interest in the troop. So why was he suddenly calling to ask about them now? Wait, this kid must have passed the hunter exam and got his hunter license, meaning he could see things that ordinary people couldn't. Not long ago, this kid even wanted to borrow money from him. Could it be? Do you need something from them? Pampas asked calmly. No way, is it really what I think it is? They're worth 10 billion each. If I kill 10 of them, that's 100 billion, and I'm still short 100 billion. The young man said excitedly. No, you don't want to do that. Pampas rubbed his forehead, feeling somewhat helpless. As expected, the kid had gone crazy thinking about money. The troop was at least from the same camp, they were their own people. Attacking your own people? If the troop were dead, how would his plans move forward? Strange. Did his reaction somehow imply that this kid actually believed he could kill troop members and collect the bounty? You don't have a grudge against the troop, right? In some ways, we're all from the same place, you and them both came from Meteor City, you're like fellow villagers. Pampas sighed and started trying to persuade him. If something happened to you, the troop might even help avenge you. As he spoke, his tone grew more resolute. If a normal person who left Meteor City were killed by someone outside and the news reached back to Meteor City, the residents would definitely seek revenge. But if someone was sold or left through illegal means, and their death went unnoticed, there wasn't much that could be done. Of course, the same applied to adults. If a Meteor City resident was wronged outside, the ones who wronged them would also face retribution. Like the case a few years ago, when a Meteor City resident was arrested as a criminal, and after the truth came out, everyone involved in the case, police officers, judges, and so on, ended up being blown to bits. Just like the saying that had been circulating in Meteor City for a long time, we don't refuse anything. No one can take anything from us. Huh? The Phantom Troop is that nice? Seer said, his tone genuinely shocked, not acting. An A-level wanted criminal, funding children in Meteor City. And if something happened to him, they'd still be kind enough to avenge him? Not convinced? At least to the residents of Meteor City, they're still pretty good, Pampas said casually. As for how they treated people from the outside world, he didn't care much about that. People from the outside world didn't care about Meteor City's existence, and the residents of Meteor City didn't care about how the outside world treated them. You're not looking at the wanted list right now, are you? Pampas asked, voicing his inner suspicion. I am. There are quite a few A-level wanted criminals. Seer answered, continuing to scroll through the list. Suddenly, his eyes stopped on a familiar face. A brown-haired man had completely abandoned his previous honest image, now sporting a slicked-back hairstyle and a fierce, intimidating expression. Sid from District 12. A-level wanted criminal, bounty 800 million? Sid is worth 800 million? Seer said in surprise. You noticed him too. Pampas couldn't help but pinch the bridge of his nose in frustration. What's so surprising about that? About 1/5 of the NEN users who left Meteor City are on the wanted list. He said it as though it were an everyday occurrence. You're not on the list too, right? Seer continued scrolling, not finding Pampas's face. Even if I did something bad, no one would be able to catch me on camera. Pampas spoke with a hint of pride in his voice. So he had done something bad, but hadn't been caught on camera. As expected from Meteor City, a place full of talent, might as well rename it Gotham. Stop focusing on the troop. Without them, Meteor City would be in big trouble, Pampas urged once more. At present, the troop was the only force in Meteor City that could stand up to the Elder Council. Without them, life for the residents of Meteor City would go back to how it was before. Possibly even worse. The number of missing children would skyrocket, and Meteor City would become a human organ farm for outside gangs. All right, I get it, Seer said, hanging up the phone and discarding his thoughts of looking for the troop. If the troop were gone, no one would be left to fund District 12. Where else could he find someone to exploit? Maybe Pampas would see him as the easy target for money. Forget it, let's look at something else. Seer shifted his focus and continued scanning other tasks. Chapter 63. A-level murderer Kleber Farr, responsible for the deaths of 135 women, bounty 150 million. Good, I'll take this one. Seer casually accepted the mission. However, a prompt popped up on the computer screen. This task has already been taken by 3 other hunters. Are you sure you want to accept it? Hey, I wasn't planning on sharing the money with the other 3. Seer frowned and clicked confirm. If anyone wanted to fight him over the money, then so be it. If, during the pursuit, the other hunters suddenly found themselves eliminated by some explosive effort, well, that kind of thing wasn't so unusual, right? Kleber Farr, Seer mumbled the name, worth 150 million. He felt like he'd heard this name somewhere before. The man on the wanted poster had short, reddish-brown hair, reddish-brown eyes, pale skin, and a few freckles on his face. He was around 30 years old. His expression was manic, gloomy, and hysterical. Like a piece of wood burning red-hot, about to turn to black ash. Ah, I remember now. Not long ago, when he was searching for the official venue and staying at a hotel, he had heard this name on the news on the television. If he remembered correctly, there was also a terrorist group called the Crows. With that thought, Seer began searching for information on the Crows. What popped up were a series of terrorist attacks they had orchestrated. They had been active all over the world, responsible for multiple bombings, kidnappings, and like the Phantom Troop, they moved like shadows, no known member identities, and no one knew how many people were involved. At least the troop had their spider tattoos, but the crows seemed to have no such identifiers. Searching for them was like looking for a needle in a haystack, far too time-consuming. He skipped over it and moved on to the next task. Seer carefully selected bounties for A-level and B-level criminals that had names, photos, or at least a general idea of their locations. If he managed to catch them all, that would add up to 2 billion. He couldn't deny that this felt like one of those games where you grind through progress bars. Filling up 100 billion XP progress bar was just a piece of cake for the players. "Master, I'm ready." Mero rushed over, holding his bag. Ah. Seer logged into a new website on the computer. Once logged in, a page titled Hunter Tavern appeared. There was a bartender and a few customers at the tables. Clicking on different individuals triggered different responses. Seer clicked on the bartender, and suddenly a menu popped up on the screen, accompanied by the bartender's voice. "What kind of information would you like?" Searching for Kleber Far, the options that appeared were sparse. Kleber Far, A-level wanted criminal, with a peculiar habit of only killing women over the age of 20, and he also removes their uterus. He has currently fled the Republic, whereabouts unknown. The bartender in the computer screen continued to wipe a glass and explained leisurely. Republic of Rocario. Seer took out a map and circled a rough area. "I heard the news more than half a month ago. That's plenty of time for him to have left the mighty Union. He likely traveled by ship or airship. So, he's probably on Yorbian now." Seer stroked his chin as he analyzed. Of course, it was also possible that he was still lingering around the Balsa Islands. The first crime he committed was reportedly in the Republic of the Mighty Union, followed by the Gorto Republic, then the Haas Republic, and finally the Republic of Rocario. Due to strict border control in the NGL Republic, no weapons or synthetic fabric clothing allowed, every part of the body is thoroughly checked, so he had never entered there. After that, the nearest place to the Republic of Rocario was the Balsa Islands. The continent where the Heavens Arena is located is far from Yorbian, a distance that would take 10 to 15 days by regular airship. Such a hassle. He began looking through a pile of bounties to see if there were any criminals closer by. He picked out 2 criminals whose most recent crimes were committed the shortest time ago and whose locations were the closest. Perfect, these 2 will do. They were on the same continent, so finding them should be quicker. He decided to leave the criminals from other continents for now. If someone else claimed the bounty first. Damn it. Once I find these criminals, I'll make sure to smash their heads in. The white-haired youth's brows furrowed, his expression filled with viciousness. He clenched his fist tightly, his tone menacing. Mero lowered his brows and breathed lightly, not daring to say another word. "Let's go, let's find this guy first." Seer calmed himself and put a cold, lazy expression back on his face. He pointed at a face on the computer screen, closed the laptop, and left the room. Let's just consider this a stroll, like a little sightseeing. Ever since coming into the hunter world, has he been losing his patience more and more? This is not a good change. It needs to be corrected. Mero stared at the computer screen, imprinting that face deeply into his mind. Those who made the master unhappy should all disappear. He lowered his emerald green eyes, concealing all the obscurity and darkness within them. When he lifted his gaze again, he appeared as weak and easy to bully as ever. Larry Baya, male, 29 years old, left-handed, with distinctive features, uneven legs and a black birthmark at the corner of his left eye. Quite the obvious features this guy has. Seer couldn't help but remark. A left-handed person, with uneven legs, and a birthmark. This guy really stood out. The information says his last crime was a week ago, in the Republic. The police tracked him all the way, but just as they were about to catch him, 2 days ago, he vanished again. If nothing unexpected has happened, he should still be somewhere on this continent. The bounty is only 50 million, but I suppose I'll reluctantly accept it, Seer said, standing in the elevator, ignoring the elevator attendant in the corner and muttering his analysis to himself. The elevator attendant's expression gradually shifted from blank to numb. "Sir, the elevator has arrived." Her voice was as calm and lifeless as still water, offering the reminder with no change in tone. Seer and Morrow exited the elevator. The first floor of the Heavens Arena was always crowded, filled with a variety of new faces. Suddenly, Seer's steps faltered for a moment, and his gaze fell upon a figure in the crowd. The person didn't have a black birthmark on their left eye, and they were holding a bag with their right hand. There was no leakage of energy, and their life force seemed slightly stronger than an ordinary person's, likely someone with Nen. The legs looked even, but the left shoe is padded, isn't it? Seer thought. The left shoe appeared lighter than the right one. If you looked closely, you'd notice that the Achilles tendon of the left foot was actually exposed beneath the pants, with only the heel in the shoe. But the right foot didn't have the same issue. So, a case of uneven legs? Could it be? Am I about to get lucky just as I'm about to leave? Seer thought, the corners of his mouth curling into an ever-widening smile. His figure disappeared from the spot. Chapter 64. Larry Baya, male, 29 years old, a Class B wanted criminal, charged with theft. Specializing in disguise and infiltration, Larry frequently used these skills to sneak into the estates of wealthy individuals and commit theft. With stolen goods valued at over 1 billion, he earned a Class B bounty, worth 50 million. Larry Baya despised the bounty on his head, finding it laughably low. Any single item he stole was often worth more than 50 million. However, this time, the wealthy victim had hired a contract hunter. Larry was caught mid-heist and barely managed to escape after exhausting all his tricks. The police pursued him relentlessly, so he decided to hide at the Heavens Arena to evade capture temporarily. After a while, once the police gave up the search, he'd make his move again. Due to certain reasons, the police had no jurisdiction over the Heavens Arena, and anyone could enter the competitions there as long as they had an ID. Larry always carried at least 5 different IDs, so picking one at random was no issue. It was also an excellent chance to earn some extra money. The lower-level fighters were all weak anyway. On the surface, Larry appeared to be an ordinary, slightly tired middle-aged man, but inwardly, he arrogantly judged the weaklings around him. Until Larry Baya, hello there. A cold hand gripped his throat tightly, exerting a force that seemed intent on snapping his neck. It felt like being coiled by a venomous serpent, ready to crush him at any moment. The voice was cold and low, yet it carried the unmistakable tone of youth. Larry's face contorted in fear. In his peripheral vision, he could only glimpse a pale white, a color that could have been skin or hair. When had this person appeared in front of him? And when had they grabbed his throat? Larry wore a pained expression of despair, wanting to plead that they had the wrong person, that he wasn't Larry Baya. But the boy gave him no chance to explain. Come with me. With those words, the hand around his neck dragged him forcefully toward a secluded corner. When Larry tried to summon his Nen to resist, another statement reached his ears. If you resist, I'll kill you. The voice was calm and emotionless, devoid of any killing intent, yet it made Larry abandon any thoughts of defiance instantly. Bang! After being dragged into the corner, Larry was slammed against the wall with such force that the back of his head made a harsh impact with the cold concrete, leaving him dizzy and disoriented. Before he could recover, a voice, distant yet near, echoed in his ears. I feel like your 50 million bounty is too low. Can you find a way to make yourself worth more? Yes, I think my bounty is low too. I'm actually worth a lot more, okay? This has to be a bounty hunter, right? Who else would ask such a question? I'll give you money, more than 50 million. Let me go, how about that? Larry offered in defeat. How much? The hand gripping his neck loosened slightly. 100 million. Larry tried tentatively. 200 million. The hand around his neck tightened again. Okay, I get it. I'll pay, Larry shouted desperately. Too late. Now I want 400 million. The voice let out a mocking laugh, sounding indifferent and carefree. Damn it. This blatant extortion, are you sure you're a bounty hunter? You'd make a great robber. Larry Baya was furious inside, cursing endlessly, but outwardly, he appeared meek and compliant. I only have 300 million, he muttered quietly, half-truthfully. If he agreed too easily, this guy would definitely raise the price again. Let's see. Larry Baya, over 10 billion stolen. I'm only asking for 500 million to spare your life and let you enjoy the rest of your money. Isn't that a fair deal? The voice said again. But I only have 500 million left. Thieves need to spend money too, you know. Buying intel and tools is expensive. Larry was so enraged that he almost wanted to drag this nameless guy down with him. But deep inside, he understood that if he didn't pay up, he likely wouldn't make it out of the Heavens Arena alive today. Fine, I'll transfer it to you. I don't have more than that. This is everything I have left, Larry said dejectedly. Do you have any thief friends? Can you arrange a meeting? Let's have a little chat, the youthful voice asked again. Although thieves sometimes gather to trade or help each other, those meetings are irregular and require at least a month's notice to set up, Larry replied, sounding utterly drained. His exhausted expression made it clear how much of a headache this was for him. I can't get anyone together, he sighed. Despite his complaints, he didn't stop moving. He pulled out his card and the portable card reader he always carried, handing them over. The password is... he muttered with a resigned air of defeat. With a soft beep, the transfer was complete. The money on his card was now gone forever. Larry had many fake identities, and naturally, the card wasn't registered under his real name. Otherwise, the authorities could track him down through his spending history. It didn't matter, as long as he was alive, he could always steal more. And I'll never come back to the Heavens Arena again. All right, you can go now. The hand that had been gripping his neck finally let go. Larry was sure his neck was bruised in a perfect ring. His gaze fell on the two figures before him. The white-haired, blue-eyed boy with dark facial markings leaned casually against the wall, exuding an air of carelessness. Beside him stood a blonde-haired young man, bowing his head slightly in a posture of deference. Though Larry had guessed from the voice that the boy was young, he hadn't expected him to be this young. Not even 15, was he? Forget it, it had nothing to do with him anyway. Well then, farewell, Larry Baya said with a bright smile as he turned and bolted away. Hopefully, they'd never meet again. But after only 2 steps, the world around him spun. How strange. Why was he looking up at the two of them from this angle? And what was that body lying over there? Was it his? Oh, so my head's fallen off. I never said I didn't want your 50 million bounty. I gave you the chance to run, it's your fault you didn't get away, Seer said calmly, standing just outside the slowly spreading pool of blood. He bent down, reached out, and peeled off the disguise on Larry's severed head, revealing his true face. Then, Seer pulled out his phone, snapped a picture of the head, and started contacting the nearest police station. While doing so, he also collected all the fake IDs from Larry's belongings. Once the police confirmed the identity of the corpse, the bounty would be transferred to Seer's account. I think I've figured out the true essence of being a bounty hunter, Seer said thoughtfully. Making money off bounties? No, no, no. The real essence, of course, was claiming the criminal's assets. That was far faster than relying solely on bounty payouts. The bounty itself didn't really matter, he was just doing his part to bring justice to the world by catching criminals. And if the police asked about the stolen goods? No idea, would be the answer. Who could say where criminals spent their stolen money? What did that have to do with him, a righteous bounty hunter? Suddenly, catching criminals doesn't seem so boring anymore, Seer said with a cheerful smile, his voice filled with delight. Chapter 65. A staff member at the Heavens Arena casually glanced toward the corner and suddenly froze, eyes wide with shock, their jaw almost hitting the floor. What was that on the ground? A human head. And the spreading red stain? Blood. Blood flowing out from the neck of a headless corpse. The floor stained again. Cleaning this up is going to be such a hassle. Hey, you, the staff member instinctively spoke up, striding toward the scene of the crime. The perpetrator looked very familiar, white hair, blue eyes, black tattoos on both his face and hands, the Heavens Arena's newest rising star with insane popularity. Known not only for his exceptional skills at such a young age but also for his mischievous habit of taunting his opponents with relentless trash talk during battles. Of course, the primary reason for his fame might just be the fact that his face alone could outshine the combined charm of every Heavens Arena fighter. This is a wanted criminal, Seer said lazily, standing there with his phone in hand, completely at ease and unbothered. No, what I mean is, could you maybe choose a different spot next time? If someone walks through here, they'll track bloody footprints all over the place. The staff member's tone was stern. That priority. Only someone working in the Heavens Arena could focus on such a thing. However, an invisible slash grazed the staff member's cheek and struck the floor behind him, leaving a deep crack. I don't need you to tell me how to do things, Seer said in a low voice, his cold, sky-blue eyes, praised by many as rare and breathtaking, like precious gemstones, fixing on the staff member. Those eyes didn't just represent beauty. They were the embodiment of beauty paired with endless danger. Faced with such eyes, the staff member's body began to tremble uncontrollably. I'll let you off this time. There won't be a next, Seer muttered indifferently, shifting his gaze away. The staff member silently fetched cleaning tools and diligently began scrubbing the floor, not uttering another word. He had nearly forgotten, anyone who made it to the 200th floor of the Heavens Arena was never the kind of person you could reason with. The Heavens Arena held a unique position in this world, to the point where even the police acted low-key when stepping inside, refraining from wearing uniforms. Wait. Did the police even have uniforms in this world? Probably, right? As Seer watched the officers efficiently remove the corpse, he pondered this trivial thought. Soon enough, the 50 million bounty hit his account. Pulling out his phone, he began reviewing the details of his next target. Next up is Chad the Flayer. 6'4", bald, enjoys skinning beautiful people to keep their skins as trophies. Wow. What a creep. Seer commented flatly. This world certainly wasn't short on twisted individuals. Collecting body parts. Honestly, he found it a bit disgusting. Well, everyone has their quirks, their preferences. Seer didn't understand, but he could tolerate it. This guy's hobby is gambling. Every time he gets caught, it's because he gambled too much at a casino and lost his cool. The life of a degenerate gambler. Truly a tale of downfall, Seer said, shaking his head in disdain. Then let's try our luck at a nearby casino, Seer said, striding toward the main gates of the Heavens Arena. Of course, he could test his luck as well. But with 6 eyes, it'd be pretty hard to lose at any gambling table. Not that he was particularly fond of gambling himself. His father once lost 30 million in a single night at the gambling table. Afterward, he developed a gambling addiction and continued losing more over time. Ever since then, Seer believed one thing: gamblers couldn't be trusted, not a word they said. Casinos weren't often found operating openly and legally. Most were small underground establishments. In those small joints, a few 100,000, or at most $1 million, would be the upper limit for any betting table. But the casinos that ran out in the open, in plain view, clearly had significant backing. Naturally, the stakes were much higher, too. If someone was a true gambler, there was no way they'd settle for playing at some backwater gambling den. That's why customers like Seer weren't exactly welcome in such establishments. Standing in his way was a tall, burly security guard in a black suit who looked every inch a mafia enforcer. His expression showed outright disapproval. So, a miner could earn a hunter's license, brave life-and-death situations, but couldn't enter a casino? Seriously, was that fair? Seer didn't even bother lifting his gaze to look at the man, confidently ignoring him as he continued walking forward. The security guard moved to block him again, but before he could, Mero, who had been silent until now, stepped in front of him. "Move. Don't block the way," Mero snapped, his tone icy. Something flashed in Mero's hand, so quickly it was barely visible. The moment the guard saw it, his eyes glazed over for a second before he immediately bowed his head in deference. A member of the Palisha family? And yet, he was acting like a subordinate, following behind that white-haired boy. The guard picked up his walkie-talkie to report. "A Palisha family member has appeared. I'm not sure which one, but I'm certain of his identity." He showed proof, something only Palisha family members possess. "He isn't alone. It seems he's accompanying a white-haired boy as if he were his subordinate." "Understood. I'll inform the staff in the main hall to keep an eye on them." Meanwhile, Seer and Mero had already stepped inside the casino. The interior was a sea of gold. It felt like the entire building was constructed from solid gold. The air carried a nauseating mixture of alcohol, cigarette smoke, and incense, along with an unusually high oxygen concentration. In this oxygen-rich environment, everyone's faces were flushed red, a testament to the casino's subtle manipulation of their surroundings. The scene was enough to make one's blood boil, filling them with inexplicable excitement. Of course, those with less sensitive noses probably wouldn't notice the heavy mixture of smells. The building also had a ventilation and air conditioning system in place, maintaining a steady temperature. The dealers, meanwhile, were either dressed sharply in suits or adorned in high-slit, seductive dresses. Their smiles were all eerily uniform, as if meticulously trained to perfection. "Your demeanor back there wasn't bad," Seer remarked casually, not even turning his head as he complimented Mero, who followed behind him. "I learned it from watching my siblings," the blonde-haired young man replied, sounding a little embarrassed by the praise. In his memories, his brothers and sisters always acted with the same reckless arrogance and pride. For Mero, the haughty demeanor of adults seemed natural and commanding, impossible to look away from. But his siblings' arrogance was repulsive to him. Even though he was an illegitimate child, he was still a Palisha family member. From a young age, he'd been afforded the same privileges as any other young master, though the only ones who bullied him were his siblings. His siblings' arrogance was often said to resemble their father. Meanwhile, Mero's perceived weakness was dismissed as shameful and pitiful. "Keep that attitude up," Seer said lightly. "Did the master really think what he did earlier was good?" "Understood." Mero lowered his gaze, but the deep-seated weakness lingering in his expression wasn't so easily erased. "Keep an eye out for Chad, and while you're at it, exchange 100 million for chips for me," Seer instructed casually as he found an open seat at a gambling table and sat down. "Got it," Mero replied, bowing slightly before heading off. He moved through the casino with practiced ease, quickly locating the area where chips could be exchanged. "Hey hunters! Cult leader here. This is your reminder that breaks are important. Unless you're Killua. Then you're just built different anyway, onward." Chapter 66. 100 million Jenny, exchanged into chips of various denominations, was piled on the table in several stacks. A young boy sat openly at the gambling table, drawing many curious and scornful glances. This kid. How spoiled and reckless must he be to end up here at such a young age? What a shame his parents must feel for raising such a wasteful child. The crowd whispered and gossiped, conveniently forgetting that they themselves were also sitting in a casino. Yet no matter how much they mocked or sneered, when they saw the boy winning hand after hand, envy began to creep into their expressions. "Just beginner's luck," someone muttered dismissively. After all, didn't everyone have a streak of wins when they first started gambling? But once that beginner's protection wore off, it all came down to luck, or fate. These seasoned gamblers, who had spent years in casinos, knew all too well that losses far outweighed wins. But an hour later, those watching closely were astonished to find that the boy hadn't lost a single round. The dealer's professional smile grew increasingly strained. The boy's chips, which had started as a modest pile, were now stacked high into multiple towers. "All in," the white-haired boy said with a yawn, pushing his entire stack of chips into one betting area. The precarious towers toppled, scattering chips across the table. The gamblers at the table, noticing the boy's extraordinary streak of luck, followed suit and placed their bets in the same area. The dealer hesitated, frozen in place. "Hurry up and show the result." Seer leaned lazily against his chair, his tone casual yet commanding. Marrow, standing beside him, handed him a glass of juice provided by the casino. The gambler's feverish eyes, the dealer's pale face, and the boy's relaxed demeanor combined to create a tense atmosphere. "Don't waste everyone's time." Seer sipped from his straw, gesturing with his free hand for Marrow to massage his shoulders. The dealer took a deep breath. Invisible energy extended from within him, ready to subtly alter the outcome. With just a touch, the results would change. And those who were supposed to win? They'd all lose instead. At this table, it was the dealers who controlled the gamblers' wins, losses, and even their lives. But why? The white-haired boy placed a hand on the table, raising an eyebrow with a dangerous smirk. "Don't try anything shady." Seriously? He hadn't even won that much yet, and they were already panicking? The energy poised to alter the results was abruptly dispersed by another, more powerful force. The dealer's face turned even paler. It had happened before, every time, the same thing. Every attempt to interfere ended in failure. The boy across the table was undoubtedly a Nen user far more powerful than himself. When the results were revealed, the gamblers erupted in joy, while the dealer's expression grew increasingly despondent. "Forget it. Chad isn't here anyway. Let's find another casino," Seer said, sweeping all the chips into his arms and standing up to leave. If he kept winning like this, the casino's owner would probably have a heart attack. Could Chad really have gone to some obscure, back alley casino? Marrow followed behind, carrying a tray piled high with chips, heading to the counter to exchange them for Janie. Suddenly, several men in black suits, guns holstered at their waists and radios in hand, approached them. "Sir, there are some guests in the VIP lounge upstairs who would like to invite you to join them," one of the security guards said politely, though his demeanor was anything but gentle. "The VIP lounge?" Seer glanced at the guards, his tone laced with amusement. "I'd bet they don't have the best intentions. Like, maybe luring him into a soundproofed room upstairs just to unload a barrage of gunfire on him. If he ended up dead, there'd be no way to claim his winnings. And if no one could take them, the money would conveniently stay with the casino. Ah, the same shady tactics, no matter which world." "You're joking," the guard replied stoically, though his hand motioned firmly toward the stairs. Feigning easy compliance, the white-haired boy pivoted and headed toward the so-called VIP lounge. "Fine, let's go see what they want." His tone was light, almost playful. Mero, still carrying the chips, followed closely behind as they ascended to the upper floor. On the 29th floor, inside the VIP lounge, there wasn't a single guest, only a line of security guards, armed and ready. The head guard tossed a phone toward Mero. Balancing the tray of chips in one hand, Mero deftly caught the phone with the other. "Mero Palisha, I heard you ran away from home. Never expected to see you here," came the voice of a middle-aged man on the other end. "Is this old Palisha's doing?" The voice belonged to the head of the Dorink family, a middling mafia boss. His rank was higher than most, yet he hadn't managed to break into the world's top 10 mafia rankings, leaving him in a somewhat awkward position of power. Also the owner of the casino. "This has nothing to do with my father," Mero replied calmly. "Oh? Then it's just your personal choice?" The man on the other end sneered, his tone brimming with anger. If it were just this kid winning, that would have been tolerable. It would simply mean he was taking other customers' money. But this brat had influenced everyone else at the table to follow his bets. With no losers among the customers, who bore the losses? The casino did. The money being won was coming out of their pockets. This was blatant sabotage. "What the master wants is what I want," Mero replied with the same calmness. "Fine, fine, fine." Old Palisha would never have expected his son to become the lackey of some wet-behind-the-ears kid after running away from home. Dorink jeered coldly. "I'll be sure to pass the message to your father." "Be my guest," Mero responded with an indifferent tone. "I'll give you a choice: abandon all your chips, take only your original stake, and leave this place. Or never leave at all." "You talk too much, old man." Seer, standing to the side, impatiently cut off the voice on the other end of the call. "Let me make something clear, even becoming my lackey isn't something just anyone can do. And someone like you, you're not even qualified to try. I look forward to meeting you. When we do, I'll twist your head off and use it as a ball." With a slight movement of his finger, a slicing sound rang out. The well-armed security team in the room was instantly reduced to dozens of pieces. The phone in Mero's hand was similarly shattered into fragments. "Boring," Seer remarked as he turned to leave the so-called VIP lounge. Honestly, aside from the 10 Don's shadow beasts, most mafia organizations weren't much to speak of. Few of them even had Nen users. As the door opened, a thick scent of blood wafted out. The guards stationed at the entrance immediately realized something was wrong when they saw the two supposed victims walking out unscathed. Upon smelling the blood, the lead guard quickly gave the order, "Fire." But Seer's hands moved faster than their fingers could pull the triggers. With a casual flick, their guns fell to the floor, along with their severed arms. Following the arms and guns, their heads hit the ground as well. Blood sprayed out, soaking into the plush carpet beneath their feet. Screams erupted from the other patrons as they scrambled to escape. The casino staff, including the seemingly harmless and beautiful maids, grabbed weapons to retaliate. The smell of gunpowder quickly overwhelmed the lingering fragrance in the air, and the once opulent walls were now speckled with blood. A few bursts of gunfire echoed through the halls, then silence fell over the casino. "What? You're telling me everyone at the casino is dead?" "I understand." In the Dorink family's estate, the furious boss slammed his phone into pieces. He glared at the remote surveillance footage showing the white-haired, blue-eyed boy, his face twisting further in rage. "I want you dead. You must die." Chapter 67. "This casino's cash reserves only amount to 2 billion. Seer said as he broke open the vault door. He glanced at the pile of cash stored inside and sounded less than impressed. It wasn't a small amount, but he had expected more. Because of frequent robberies, the major mafia establishments no longer stockpile large amounts of cash, Mero explained. When some criminals ran out of money, the first thing they thought of was robbery. While most were weak and easily dealt with, a small number of stronger individuals had successfully made off with significant cash reserves. What a pity, Seer said casually. He had hoped this would be enough to gather the money he needed to buy Inverted Spear of Heaven. 2 billion jenny was small, no wonder the casino had tried to stop him from leaving. His winnings exceeded their total cash reserves. And that was likely compounded by the other gamblers who had followed his bets and also won big. Honestly, it's not like I told them to copy me, Seer muttered, pouting slightly in annoyance. He had been ready to cash out and leave, but the casino had tried to keep him there. Truly, a path to their own destruction. Not to mention, with so many previous robberies, the casino had clearly been prepared for situations like this. If you need money, there are plenty of other places to get it, Mero suggested hesitantly, his voice quiet. There were still quite a few places, similar to this casino, that would have significant cash reserves. In this world, the mafia held immense power. Much like the Hunter Association, they had their own mafia association. Their influence was vast. Their strength? Not always impressive, but their wealth? Absolutely substantial. Are you suggesting robbery? Seer glanced at him. Mero, despite his timid exterior, seemed to have a mindset very much in line with the mafia lifestyle. But unfortunately, I have no interest in robbery, Seer said, shaking his head. Resorting to robbery just because you lack money is a very low-level move. To put it simply, it was unrefined. The kind of thing a nameless cannon fodder villain would do in an anime. Even if there was a tragic or complex reason behind it, when revealed, it would only make the person seem pitiful and pathetic. No matter how striking their background, they'd remain a mere supporting character. And Seer? He had no reason to stoop to something like robbery. He simply wanted to buy the cursed tool to play with. At most, it was just a matter of buying it sooner or later. It wasn't a situation where he couldn't survive without money. As a pure egoist, robbery wouldn't bring him any joy or interest. Don't compare me to a robber. While stuffing cash into SC's mouth, he spoke slowly and deliberately. And as for the money from the casino? He clearly earned it with his skills. Speaking of which, that Dorink family still owed him compensation for emotional distress. As a proper guest, he had nearly been shot to death by them. By any logic, that was the host's fault, right? I apologize, sir. Mero deeply felt that his earlier thoughts had insulted Seer and couldn't help but apologize in shame. How could he have ever thought that Seer would resort to robbery? Where is the Dorink family? I'm wondering if I should go over there first and silence them. After stuffing all the cash into the curse's mouth, Seer murmured thoughtfully. Can they summon the shadow beasts? Seer asked with a tone of curiosity. The shadow beasts? Oh, that combat unit under the 10 Dons. The Dorink family can't do it. Only the 10 Dons or the top 10 mafia bosses behind them can mobilize the shadow beasts. Mero shook his head calmly, his lowered gaze falling on the ice blade in his palm. His golden, chin-length hair almost blended into the golden walls behind him, even stained with the same splatters of blood. He had just killed someone. With the blade of ice he had formed, he effortlessly killed several people. The blood hadn't even had time to drip before freezing into red crystals, refracting the light from the chandelier above. It wasn't as difficult to accept as he had imagined. On the contrary, it was surprisingly easy. Aren't the 10 Dons the heads of the mafia? Seer asked, puzzled. When it came to the mafia in the Hunter world, all he remembered were the 10 Dons. With such prominence, they weren't the leaders? The 10 Dons are merely representatives they elected. The real leaders are others behind the scenes, Mero said as the ice blade in his hand turned to water and then to steam, vanishing without a trace. Only a faintly damp air lingered briefly before dispersing. Ah! No wonder it had been so easy to kill them, and no one pursued the matter afterward. It made sense. After all, showing up in person at Yorknew to meet with a bunch of mid-tier and small-time mafia bosses over an auction would indeed seem beneath them. In the original story, weren't there a few people who avoided attending the auction thanks to that prophecy from, what was her name again? Neon? They narrowly escaped death because of it. Maybe the Mafia has other prophetic talents on their side too. Then he'll definitely try to get revenge on me, right? Like issuing a Mafia bounty or hit order? The white-haired, blue-eyed boy speculated aloud, though his face was filled with eager anticipation. He looked forward to a Mafia bounty. It sounded so cool. Like becoming a celebrity overnight. But thinking about how the Dorink family couldn't even summon the shadow beasts, it seemed unlikely they could issue a proper Mafia bounty either. Sure enough, Mero confirmed Seer's guess. It's most likely just going to be a personal bounty issued by the Dorink family. The relationships within the Mafia weren't particularly harmonious. Unless they all got humiliated together, it was rare for others to stick their necks out for the Dorink family. They might hire assassins or enlist other hunters instead, Mero analyzed, his gaze lowered. Considering the Dorink family's personality and their current rage, it was highly likely they'd turn to the Zoldyck family. After all, the Zoldycks were known for their efficiency and a near-perfect completion rate. Assassins. The Zoldycks. Oh, I was actually planning to visit their place sometime, Seer said casually, walking out as he spoke. The Zoldyck family's base. And their famous Gate of Hell. Something that's stylish, it's only natural to want to check it out, right? The Zoldyck family seems to have a tradition, children with white hair and blue eyes become the family heads. Seer paused mid-step, looking at his reflection in the golden wall. A grin spread across his face. White hair and blue eyes. Mero quickly looked up at the boy. The man he had chosen to follow had hair like frost and snow and piercing blue eyes. But unlike ordinary blue eyes, Seer's were far more stunning, and intense, deep blue that seemed to hold drifting clouds and an infinite stretch of sky. What if I go to the Zoldycks, claim to be their long-lost child, and say I'm actually one of them? Do you think they'll believe me? Seer asked with an amused gleam in his eye, clenching his fists in mock excitement. I'm going to play at being the Zoldyck family head. His previously bored expression vanished, replaced by a strange mix of excitement and mischief. Me, with my white hair and blue eyes, Killua's long-lost twin. Pay up. Hand over the position of family head. And then, I can hold Killua's head and say, my foolish little brother, the Zoldyck family is in good hands with me. Go play somewhere else. Whatever you wish to do, my lord, you will surely succeed, Mero said after a brief silence, resolutely affirming Seer's idea. Blood relations? That didn't matter at all. If Seer was willing to acknowledge himself as a Zoldyck, the Zoldyck family should feel honored. Chapter 68. The curtains were tightly drawn, and the dim office relied solely on incandescent lighting. A middle-aged man sat within, his tightly furrowed brows seemingly capable of crushing a fly. Around him, the bodyguards stood silently, saying nothing. Dorink had been in a foul mood these past few days. For some reason, the incident at his casino, where someone had caused a massive scene, had spread like wildfire. Now, whenever he went out to meet people, they would greet him with cheerful smiles and say, "I heard someone trashed one of your casinos? What bad luck." His accumulated anger was becoming more and more intense, like a bomb on the verge of exploding. Yet, over the past few days, he had forcibly suppressed his rage and taken no action. To avoid hearing other people's gossip, he had also stopped going out as much. Since the incident, he had been holding on to this burning fury until the start of the new month. "Boss, Someone from the Nostrade family is here, one of his bodyguards, dressed in a black suit, said after answering a phone call. He looked to Dorink for instructions. Let them in, Dorink said, taking a deep breath and signaling for him to proceed. The Nostrade family had once been an unremarkable, small organization until they produced someone with the ability to perform prophecies. Many mafia bosses had since become clients of this fortune teller. The monthly prophecies brought them significant benefits. And today was the day the new month's prophecy results had been delivered. The Nostrade family had sent someone to deliver it in person. Soon, the bodyguard returned with a piece of paper bearing black handwriting and handed it to Dorink. There were only a few lines written on it. The room you trust most in your heart. That shall become the bed on which you sleep. If there is no path to leave, then do not step into it. And do not pluck the unripe fruit. A chilling, ominous air practically emanated from the words. In the prophecies given by this fortune teller, peaceful sleep often equated to death. In other words, this prophecy was foretelling his death. Why? Was it referring to unripe fruit? But he didn't even like eating unripe fruit. Dorink stared at the prophecy for a long time before giving a direct order. From now on, make sure no green fruit ever appears in front of me. He issued the command to his bodyguards with a serious expression. Yes, sir. The head bodyguard found the order somewhat strange but dutifully acknowledged it. Feeling that he had resolved the matter, Dorink leaned back in his chair and let out a long exhale. Now, contact the Zulks. 5 billion. I want that boy dead. Oh, and make sure to bring his head back to me. That boy's eyes. They're truly beautiful, Dorink said, his expression dark and tinged with a twisted fascination. Even in the blurry surveillance footage, those eyes were captivating enough to stand out. The real thing would undoubtedly be even more striking. He was growing tired of his collection of scarlet eyes. Standing up, Dorink pulled away the black cloth draped over a nearby cabinet. Through the glass doors, he admired the items within. Rows upon rows of despair-laden scarlet eyeballs, pale, delicate hands with long, slender fingers, a faintly pink brain. The cabinet was densely packed with human organs, trophies he had acquired over the years. Yet, in comparison to those blue eyes, they all seemed lackluster. His interest in his collection had diminished significantly. If those blue eyes could join his collection, he would clear out an entire row just for them. Dorink imagined himself personally gouging out those eyes, preserving them in formalin, and placing them on the topmost shelf of the cabinet. They would become the centerpiece of his collection, a unique treasure that would make him the envy of others in the collectors' circles who shared his peculiar tastes. In a dimly lit tavern, a young man with long black hair sat silently, speaking into a phone with a calm and steady voice. His pitch-black, unreflective eyes, coupled with his jet-black hair, pale complexion, and indifferent tone, gave him an eerie presence, almost like that of a ghostly apparition. 5 billion. I'll take the job. Across from him, a red-haired man, clearly annoyed at being ignored, scrunched his face like a displeased child. Eel, are you even listening to me? That little apple I encountered was absolutely divine. I can't even begin to imagine how delicious he'll taste in the future. His pout only lasted for a moment before his expression turned complicated, part frustration, part excitement. His crimson tongue flicked against the rim of his glass as he savored his drink. I got a job from the mafia. I'll be heading to the northwest continent and stopping by home, the black-haired man said as he rose from his seat and headed toward the tavern's exit. The northwest continent, the home of the Zoldyck family and the location of Heaven's Arena. He had come to the Yorbian continent for a mission, and after completing it, he happened to run into Hisoka, who invited him for a drink, mostly because Hisoka was paying. Illumi couldn't refuse. Another mission, huh? Hisoka's sharp, upturned eyes gleamed with a hint of danger. Once Illumi left, there probably wouldn't be anyone else willing to have a proper conversation with him. Even if most of their conversations consisted of Illumi listening without much response. What's the target this time? How strong are they? Hisoka asked suddenly, a curious edge to his voice. Illumi didn't find it strange at all. Hisoka often roamed the world looking for strong or promising individuals, occasionally taking on tasks simply out of boredom. For example, if he happened to encounter a target with decent strength while bored, he might propose accompanying Illumi. The battles? Hisoka handled them. The kills? Hisoka did them. The commissions? Not a single cent went to Hisoka. Fortunately, Hisoka had no interest in money, only in fighting. So, from Illumi's perspective, Hisoka was a great partner. The kind that worked for free. It's a kid. Their strength should be decent. Apparently, they trashed the client's place, Illumi said, showing Hisoka the phone. When someone hired a Zoldyck family member, they usually provided detailed information about the target. This time, however, the client couldn't find much, so all they gave was a short surveillance video. Still, since the target's appearance was distinct enough, there was no concern about identifying the wrong person. Hisoka glanced at Illumi's phone, a meaningful smile curling on his lips. I see. Well, off you go, eel. He waved dismissively, as if bidding farewell. Illumi left without a word, his expression as blank as ever. This time, Hisoka wasn't interested? What a pity. If he had been, Illumi wouldn't have needed to get involved. Then again, considering the target's age, if Hisoka had taken an interest, he would have likely deemed them a promising prey and wouldn't have allowed Illumi to take action anyway. Perhaps it was better that Hisoka wasn't intrigued. After all, Illumi wasn't too keen on facing Hisoka in a fight, his strength was quite troublesome to deal with. After Illumi left, the smile on Hisoka's face grew wider and wider. Hee. Ha ha ha. Patience. I'm really looking forward to our next meeting. Chapter 69. Hunter Calendar, February 5, 1998. Seer brought Marrow to their 17th casino. It was a small underground establishment, yet the games played here were unusually brutal. Anything you owned could become a wager on the table, even your life. The room was shrouded in darkness, with only scattered tables illuminated by dim hanging lamps. These lights weren't enough to brighten the entire space but provided just enough visibility to observe the games at each table. Many people stood around the room, some even climbing onto chairs to get a better view of the action. The patrons were ordinary folk, coming here after a long day's work to squander their meager earnings. They drank the free, low-quality liquor the casino provided, throwing cash onto the tables in a haze of alcohol and adrenaline. Cheers erupted when someone won, heightening their excitement, while murmurs of disappointment surrounded those who lost. But regardless of the outcome, the conclusion was always the same: they went for another round. This time, I'll win, they all told themselves. Seer, dressed in a black sleeveless hoodie with the hood pulled over his head, blended into the crowd of spectators. He still hadn't spotted his target. Seriously? Where is that guy, Chad? Seer sighed in frustration. Two men nearby overheard his complaint and instinctively turned to look at him. Seeing a figure who wasn't very tall or imposing, with his face obscured by the shadow of his hood, they couldn't help but laugh. Kid, are you looking for Chad? What, you think you can take him on? Another one who's heard the rumors and came to challenge Chad, huh? Talk about overestimating yourself. This one's pretty confident, though. The two men, seemingly familiar with Chad, laughed mockingly. They had clearly seen plenty of people like Seer, eager to challenge the infamous Chad. Their words were laced with sarcasm and a hint of anticipation for the spectacle. Enough. A sharp voice broke through their laughter. Stand down, Marrow. A cold, low voice followed almost immediately after. The two commands were separated by less than a second. An icy blade pressed against the men's throats, a thin red line forming as blood trickled out, only to be absorbed by the frost-coated weapon. The frost-colored blade was tinged with a faint red hue, its wielder glaring at them coldly. The blond figure's expression was grim, his emerald-green eyes filled with disdain as he scrutinized the men. He couldn't tolerate their disrespect toward Seer. Initially, Marrow had intended to kill the two, but Seer's voice stopped him. "We finally got a lead. If you kill them, we'll just get kicked out again," Seer said lazily, stifling a yawn. They had already been banned from 16 casinos, for 2 recurring reasons. Sometimes, Seer participated in games and won too much, leading to his ban. Other times, Marrow lost his temper and killed someone, also leading to their ban. Of course, the staff had always been polite, gently requesting that they leave. Marrow, it seemed, was gradually shifting from one extreme to another. Marrow had changed significantly, from initially timid to now ready to kill at the slightest provocation. Could simply being around Seer really change someone this much? Seer, stroking his chin, refused to believe Marrow's behavior was subconsciously influenced by his own. After all, Seer thought, "I'm a reasonable person." Yes. Marrow withdrew his icy blade and stood silently by Seer's side. The two men, still in shock, raised their hands to their necks. Feeling the sting of the shallow wounds, terror spread across their faces. "Well, then," said Seer, his hoodie partially concealing his face while his pale tattooed arms gleamed eerily in the dim light, "tell me about this Chad you were talking about." Their instincts screamed at them, "Obey, or die." "Chad. He comes here sometimes to play. He's got terrible luck, loses a lot. But he's strong, really strong. When he runs out of money, he goes to underground boxing matches to earn some." One of the men stammered, swallowing hard. "When does he usually come here?" Seer asked. The rowdy environment around them seemed to ignore this pocket of tense quiet. We don't know. He doesn't come at regular times. Really, we're not close to him. Not at all." The two men, who moments earlier had acted like they knew Chad well, now scrambled to distance themselves. "I see," Seer sighed, dragging out the word as if disappointed by their lack of useful information. "All right then," he said, sounding almost defeated before turning to leave with Marrow. As soon as the pair disappeared, the two men left behind heaved sighs of relief. But Seer hadn't truly left as they thought. Instead, he and Marrow waited outside in a shadowy corner near the casino. Marrow, though puzzled, didn't ask any questions. Half an hour later, a man slipped out of the casino, glancing around nervously as he walked in the shadows. After winding through back alleys and side streets, he stopped in front of an unassuming small house. Knocking on the wooden door in a specific rhythm, it opened quickly. A tall, intimidating man stood behind it, his scarred face and burned skin adding to his menacing presence. "What is it?" the man growled. "Someone was looking for you earlier," the nervous man whispered. "They specifically asked for Chad. 2 dangerous-looking guys. One of them put a knife to my throat." He tilted his head to show the faint cut, as if to emphasize the gravity of the situation. "What did they look like?" Chad asked. "One was young, not too tall, with black tattoos. The other had blonde hair." The informant gestured as he spoke. "Those two again," Chad muttered, as if he had already heard about them. He had contacts in various underground venues, casinos, loan houses, that would tip him off when trouble was near. This network had helped him evade bounty hunters and law enforcement countless times. Those two odd individuals had been loudly looking for him across several venues, making no effort to hide their intent. Chad had already heard about them more than once. "Got it. You should head back and avoid contacting me for a while," Chad said, pulling out his wallet and handing the informant a stack of bills. "Thanks, Chad. You're as generous as ever." The man beamed, clutching the cash. Suddenly, his neck wound didn't hurt anymore, and he decided to return to the casino the same way he'd come. And what do gamblers do with new funds? Of course, they go right back to the tables to try their luck again. Chapter 70. Chad was just about to close the door when two figures suddenly appeared in the distance. "I knew it. A gambling addict like you suddenly laying low? Couldn't find you at any of the usual spots. Turns out you've got someone tipping you off." A young voice rang out as the two figures steadily approached. Chad watched them warily. The descriptions matched exactly what his informant had told him, a young boy with tattoos and a blonde-haired companion. The moment he saw them, Chad realized these were the two who had been after him. "Bounty hunters?" Chad asked in a questioning tone, as if intending to strike up a conversation. But before he even finished speaking, he launched himself like an arrow from a drawn bow. He didn't head toward them, though. Instead, he bolted in the opposite direction, where no one else was around. It was obvious he wasn't looking for a fight, he wanted to escape. As he ran, he glanced back over his shoulder. The two figures didn't seem interested in chasing him. They just stood there. "A mere B rank," Seer muttered, watching the figure rapidly disappearing down the narrow path ahead. "I'll leave it to you, Marrow," he said lazily. "Understood, my lord." Marrow raised his hands. Without much visible movement, an enormous frost-colored ice blade, emitting a chilling mist, appeared out of nowhere and struck Chad from behind with tremendous force. Chad, who had been midair in his escape, was struck down and slammed heavily into the ground. The sound the ice blade made as it struck Chad wasn't the sound of piercing bone, it was more like it hit metal. What's more, the exposed bones weren't white but had a faint silvery sheen. Metal bones? Must be some kind of Nen ability. It couldn't possibly be the result of technology, right? After all, the technology in this world hasn't advanced to the point of interstellar-level cybernetics where metal skeletons can replace real ones. "I was aiming to impale him completely with the ice blade," Marrow said, looking down at his hands, his tone tinged with disappointment. He hadn't managed it. Was it his attack power? Or maybe the sharpness or hardness of the ice blade wasn't enough? Still, were Chad's silver glinting bones simply too hard? "If I were to turn your bones into weapons, they'd probably be pretty useful," Seer muttered thoughtfully as he stood before Chad, observing him for a moment. "But after you die, your ability will probably disappear, right? In that case, it seems kind of pointless." He shook his head at his own idea. He reached out, casually pressing Chad, who was trying to rise and resist, back down to the ground. Somehow, Seer's pale hand possessed an unrelenting strength that made it impossible for Chad to fight back. "You seem to have quite a bit of money. I'll give you a chance, buy your life with it." The young man squatted beside Chad, smiling as he made the helpful suggestion. Chad raised his head and finally got a clear look at the face hidden beneath Seer's hood. It was indeed a very young face, almost boyish. Exquisitely beautiful yet disturbingly eerie. Even in the pitch-dark environment, those blue eyes glimmered with a radiance brighter than any gemstone. Was this the person chasing him? Or rather, how could such a person possibly be a hunter? It was utterly terrifying. As for paying for his life, precisely because he recognized how dangerous Seer was, Chad didn't believe for a second that handing over money would let him live. If that was the case, why bother giving him any money? "You think you can swindle me? Think again, kid," Chad sneered, spitting to the side in defiance. He assumed Seer would interrogate and torture him to extract the location of his hidden wealth. No matter. Chad had already prepared himself to endure such torment. But instead, he heard a single, flat-toned reply. "Is that so? Then go ahead and die. And with that, Chad lost all sense of feeling. You wasted so many days of my time. Letting you die this easily almost feels too lenient, Seer sighed as he stood, gazing down at the corpse. Still, if the body were too damaged to be recognizable, it wouldn't fetch the bounty. And Seer wasn't particularly fond of torture. It wasn't like he was some kind of sadist, after all. Oh well, he muttered. After all, he thought to himself, I'm just too kind to enjoy torturing people. The process from here was routine: submitting the mission, contacting the nearest police department, waiting for them to arrive, and then leaving the scene. He had become highly efficient at it. Naturally, the bounty money arrived quickly, as usual. Good. Now for the next one. Seer glanced at his account balance, unenthused, and began searching for his next target. He had never been particularly motivated by money, nor was he the type to save. He spent freely and rarely managed to hold on to much of it. Thankfully, being born to parents who were ridiculously skilled at spawning gold coins had meant he never had to worry about finances. The only time he ever felt short on cash was when he wanted to build an airship. When amounts started reaching tens or hundreds of millions, it simply wasn't worth the effort. For sums in the tens or hundreds of thousands, however, he could still indulge in the occasional whim. Even now, in this strange world, without his gold-spawning parents, Seer thrived comfortably. In a place where strength dictated wealth, he was as carefree as ever. Mad Bomber Bardler, appearance unknown, real name unknown. Often uses the alias Bardler at the scenes of bombing incidents. This one feels like it'll be tough to track. Let's move on to the next one, Seer muttered as he read the details on a new criminal. Suddenly, another thought crossed his mind. Speaking of which, it's been a few days now. The Mafia should have already hired someone to come after me, right? Why hasn't anyone shown up yet? His tone was a mix of confusion, curiosity, and barely concealed anticipation. Based on his own deductions, if the job had really been taken by the Zoldyck family, the one who would likely show up was that dead-eyed, eerily logical, long-haired ghost-like eldest brother, Illumi. After all, the second brother was a shut-in who rarely left the house. As for the third brother, Killua, well, he couldn't use Nen yet, so it was unlikely the Zoldycks would send him. As for the other siblings, Seer couldn't recall much about them. After all, he hadn't even finished watching the anime. Does it really take this long to get here? The Zoldyck family lives right in the Republic of Padokia, on the same continent as us. It's not even that far away. Shouldn't they have arrived by now? Or maybe the Mafia decided to give up. Seer speculated. The Mafia wasn't without resources, they had fortune-tellers, didn't they? Maybe they'd gone to consult one. Then perhaps their reading had warned them, do not provoke the one with white hair, or you will die. Spooked by such a prophecy, they might have abandoned the idea of hiring an assassin altogether. It wasn't impossible. In the original story, Neon did foresee the deaths of several Mafia bosses. Those who received the warning didn't attend the auction, and as a result, they avoided the massacre when the Phantom Troop went on a killing spree. Those who did attend were all slaughtered. With Dorink's personality, he's not the type to give up easily. I think he's definitely scheming something, Marrow said respectfully, as if offering a gentle reminder. Chapter 71. Dorink's exact thoughts were unknown to Seer and Marrow, but Seer had no interest in delving into whatever schemes the man might be plotting. Overthinking could be harmful to one's mental state. Sometimes, the more a person overanalyzes, the more their actions become restricted. So when it came to this matter, Seer chose to simply let it go. After all, whether it was a member of the Zoldyck family or some other assassin, whoever accepted the task would have to come find him in the end. All he needed to do was wait for those so-called assassins to deliver themselves to his doorstep. Let's go find the next walking gold vault, Seer said, stifling a yawn with his hand. To him, These wanted criminals were nothing more than walking treasuries or fat lambs waiting to be fleeced. Encountering one made him want to strip them clean, not just taking all their money but also cashing in on their bounty. "I believe that no matter who comes, you will win, my lord," Mero said with unwavering confidence. Was he some kind of devout follower of a blind faith deity? Still, there wasn't much wrong with what he said. "Ah, I won't lose," the white-haired youth said lightly, his tone carrying a faint smile. As for why he didn't say, "I'll definitely win," well, that phrase felt a bit unlucky to him. More like a flag. Seer didn't want some crazy mangaka slashing through dimensions to take a swipe at him from across the worlds. He wondered how far the manga had progressed after his transmigration. Had that eccentric artist become even more unhinged? He missed reading the manga, not because he expected anything particularly amazing from the story, but just to see how far the artist's madness could go. February 7, 1998. We've arrived at the destination. Illumi piloted a small aircraft, landing it smoothly at the airport. He pulled out his phone and opened the message. The information came from his younger brother, Maluki Zoldyck, who had charged him 1 million jenny for it. Fortunately, the mission reward was 500 million, so spending $1 million to locate the target was a good deal. Maluki was indeed an expert in locating targets from surveillance footage. Illumi opened the attached video file and observed his target. This footage was far clearer than the one provided by the client. It captured the subject's appearance in full detail, even offering a 360-degree view. The scene in the video was a fighting ring, with spectators filling the stands. Even through the screen, the excitement and energy of the crowd were palpable. Illumi recognized it immediately. It was the arena of Heaven's Arena. He occasionally used different faces and identities to participate in matches there, earning some extra money. In the video, the white-haired boy stood on the tip of his opponent's blade. With a light leap, he seemed to hover midair, ending the fight with a single move. That black and blue energy. Illumi's eyes fixed on the screen. Even through the recording, he could sense a certain danger emanating from it. But it wasn't lethal, not enough to hinder his mission. The Zoldyck family never abandoned a mission they had accepted. The intelligence says his name is Seer DeVille, but based on my experience, it's probably a fake identity. He is, however, a 200-floor-plus fighter in Heaven's Arena. He even fought in a match just a few days ago and is now in a resting period, taking on a few wanted bounties. For now, he's still within the Republic of Padokia. This is the bounty information I hacked from the Hunter website. To be honest, I think 1 million jenny is too little. You should pay me more, Maluki had written. He even marked out Seer's most recent routes and hacked into the Hunter website to uncover all the tasks Seer had accepted. Illumi ignored the blatant request for additional payment and focused solely on the useful intel. Paying more? Out of the question. Even for a sibling. His next target is... I see. It's him. The dark-haired young man, with lifeless black cat-like eyes, spoke with no expression on his pale and handsome but eerie face. His voice was emotionless and stiff, almost unnerving, like a ghost that had crawled out of a horror movie. I understand. I'll take the 500 million, Illumi murmured as he piloted the small aircraft away. Since Seer wasn't at Heaven's Arena anymore, there was no reason to linger there. February 8, 1998. It took Seer 3 days to track down his next target, a notorious criminal named Rajiko Bull, in a seedy bar. An A-rank criminal with a bounty of 300 million. Rajiko Bull was a professional hunter, but after obtaining his hunter license, he made other hunters his primary targets. Among the Hunter Association's 10 rules, one stipulates that hunters must have their own hunting targets. Another forbids viewing fellow hunters as prey, though those guilty of heinous crimes are exceptions. Rajiko had violated both rules in the most extreme way possible. In addition to hunting hunters, Rajiko had committed patricide, matricide, sororicide, uxoricide, and fratricide. He slaughtered his entire family and everyone within his personal and professional network. In short, he was a ruthless individual. At that moment, this ruthless man was sprawled lazily on a sofa in the bar's corner. His shirt was half open, and he was surrounded by people, engaging in debauchery. Given Rajiko's unattractive appearance, the scene was not alluring but revolting. Mero's brow furrowed slightly. He found the criminal's vulgar behavior offensive and an affront to Seer's presence. The black mirrored glass table in front of Rajiko was piled high with empty glasses, some of which had fallen to the floor and shattered into shards. "Who are you?" Rajiko slurred, his bloodshot eyes glancing up at them in a drunken haze. A white-haired boy and a blond young man, strangers Rajiko didn't recognize. The next second, an invisible slash landed precisely on his arm, severing it cleanly. Damn it! The once drunken man was instantly jolted awake by the searing pain. Ignoring his bleeding wound and disheveled clothing, he leapt up from the sofa. He kicked an unconscious bystander toward the two intruders, hoping to slow them down, then turned and bolted. Rajiko knew the bar's layout like the back of his hand. Even in complete darkness, he navigated to a hidden door with precision. "Drag him back here." Seer observed Rajiko's filthy state, coated in some unidentifiable bodily fluids, and the haphazardly sprawled bodies of men and women on the floor. Disgusted, he stepped back and gave Mero his order. Mero frowned but didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and gave chase. Seer, meanwhile, leisurely weaved through the drunken bodies on the floor and headed to the bar's back door. The back door opened into a narrow alley lined with intersecting paths. The streetlights were dim and flickering, their erratic bursts of light elongating and distorting Seer's shadow. He stood under one of the lights, watching his shadow twist and change with the unsteady glow. After waiting a short while, sounds finally came from one end of the alley. 10 minutes. "That's slow," the white-haired, blue-eyed boy remarked casually, leaning against the streetlight pole. A blond figure emerged from the shadows, dragging another body behind him. "My deepest apologies for making you wait." Mero didn't offer any explanations. Instead, he instinctively apologized with unwavering deference. Chapter 72. The man, missing an arm and with several ice blades embedded in him, bled like a sieve. Seer walked up and nudged him lightly with his foot, careful not to use too much force in case the man died on the spot. "I'll give you two options. First, pay for your life. Second, die immediately." The white-haired boy stood tall, looking down at the battered criminal. The faint sinister air from the dark patterns on his face made it hard to tell who the real villain was. Frankly, Seer looked far more evil than the injured man at his feet. Cough. Cough. Rajiko coughed up blood, his breath ragged. "I have no money." "Huh? You're throwing money around on booze and human platters, and you're saying you're broke?" Seer stared at him, clearly doubting his claim. No one who lived this lavishly could be penniless. Rajiko had killed so many people, there was no way he hadn't profited handsomely from it. "You saw it yourself. I spent it all on this." Rajiko lay on the ground, shifting to a more comfortable position as he sighed. If he had been handsome, his actions might have seemed carefree and bold. But he lacked the one crucial element of being a handsome man, a good-looking face. Instead, he came across as someone who deserved a beating. "My Marcine. I gave her a crown encrusted with blue sapphires. She loved it. Cough. Too bad your eyes can't be a gift for her. She'd love them too." Cough. Rajiko muttered, his voice slipping into delirium. "You've got guts saying that," Seer said with a blank expression before casually ending his life. In a pitch-black basement. Dorink sat on a small chair in the corner, took a deep breath, and pulled out his phone to make a call. The moment the line connected, he blurted out, "A lunatic broke into my private residence. Hurry and send someone to rescue me. I'm in the basement right now. I'm relatively safe for now. My bodyguards? That psycho killed them all. What does he look like? A maniac who plays with cards. Contact the Mafia Association, get the 10 Dons, and have them send the shadow beasts to save me." Something the person on the other end said made Dorink's tone shift, becoming slightly threatening. "You wouldn't want a Mafia Association member like me to be killed at home, would you?" Before he could finish his sentence, the hidden door to the supposedly secure room swung open. Several playing cards shot through the crack, embedding themselves in his hand and slicing open his carotid artery. The phone fell from Dorink's hand, hitting the ground with a thud. Eyes wide, he slumped from the chair, blood pooling beneath him. His trembling hand failed to reach the phone lying in the blood. The sound of high heels clicked in his ears. A figure stepped closer, bent down, and picked up the blood-covered phone. Glancing at the ongoing call, they hung up and dialed a new number. In the alley behind the bar. Living such a lavish lifestyle on the surface but being broke behind the scenes. What a poser, pretending to be something he's not. Seer kicked Rajiko's corpse in dissatisfaction while submitting the bounty claim, grumbling under his breath. Suddenly, he tilted his head toward a specific direction. "Who's there?" His bright eyes seemed to glow in the dark, like the last patch of clear sky contrasting sharply with the black of night. Illumi, who had just landed from parachuting in and was already preparing to attack with his needles, froze for a moment. How had the target noticed him? He was puzzled, but his hands didn't falter as he threw the nen-infused needles. Although the employer's target was only one person, the blonde figure trailing behind Seer was also present. Naturally, Illumi wouldn't let him go. But in the blink of an eye, both the target and his companion vanished. Illumi's long black hair, draped over his back, seemed to billow despite the still air. The eerie sight made the scene even stranger. Without even turning around, he launched himself 100 meters away with a single step. In the spot where Illumi had just stood, Seer appeared, dragging Marrow behind him. "A Zoldyck assassin?" Seer remarked, his tone one of understanding as he gazed at the figure 100 meters away. As expected, the man wielding nen needles and sporting long black hair like a ghost was Illumi, the eldest son of the Zoldyck family. A tricky opponent. Accepting this job for just 500 million felt like a loss. Illumi's face betrayed no emotion, but he was calculating internally. From the opponent's combat footage at Heaven's Arena, it was evident that the target was either an enhancement or a mission user, with a high level of skill and significant strength. Come to think of it, this job was indeed a loss. However, the Zoldyck family never abandoned a mission midway. If Illumi failed, his father or grandfather would step in to finish the job. As these thoughts crossed his mind, the number of nen needles in Illumi's hands increased. At the same time, his phone began vibrating incessantly. "Hold on a moment, let me take this call," Illumi said flatly to his opponent before pulling out his phone. "It's me, little Illumi." On the other end of the call was Hisaka. "The client is already dead. Can you stay away from my little apple?" The red-haired man leaned casually on an office desk, holding a phone in one hand and shuffling a deck of cards in the other, his smile carrying an inscrutable meaning. On the floor in the corner, Dorink lay amidst a pool of blood, his breath faint but still present, glaring at Hisaka with unyielding hatred. Hisaka glanced briefly in Dorink's direction, meeting the dying man's gaze. The last thing Dorink saw before his life ended was the red-haired clown with a star and teardrop painted beneath his eyes, smiling down at him. "I understand," Illumi said after a long silence, his tone as emotionless as ever. So that boy in the distance was already a target of Hisoka's. No wonder Hisoka had shown no interest after watching the combat footage the other day. The Zoldyck family might not abandon a mission halfway, but if the client died before the target was taken out, the mission would naturally be terminated. The deposit would also be refunded. Illumi had spent money to buy intelligence from Maluki and hired others to track surveillance footage leading to this bar. Now, not only had the 500 million vanished, but he had also incurred losses worth tens of millions. This time, it was a total loss. "I don't want to fight," Illumi said in his monotone voice. The Zoldyck family charged for kills, meaningless fights were not part of their practice. "I'm just a passerby. Goodbye," he added before climbing over the nearby walls and disappearing in just a few swift movements. Standing in place, Seer blinked, still waiting to observe Illumi's abilities. "What? He left after taking a phone call? The Zoldyck family gave up the mission on me." Seer's tone was both puzzled and a little disappointed. Even so, he had no intention of chasing after Illumi. Chapter 73. The night was dim, and the light from the street lamp only illuminated a small patch of ground. The glow was weak, flickering on and off. Logically speaking, the Zoldyck family wouldn't abandon a mission, Mero murmured, lowering his head in confusion. Unless the mission was nullified, the client withdrew, or the client was dead. If that were the case, how did Dorink die? "It probably had something to do with that phone call," Seer remarked casually. They weren't mind readers and couldn't hear what was said on the other end of the line from over 100 meters away. But it was clear that Illumi had been ready to attack, his Nen needles were already in hand. Only after taking that call did his killing intent dissipate. Who was it that called him? Marlowe wondered aloud. "If Dorink's still alive, we can just ask him," Seer said nonchalantly. "If he's dead, it doesn't matter. If we're really curious, we can just ask the Zulks directly. After all, as long as you paid, Illumi would gladly share the reason." "But, sir, you need money," Mero whispered. All of Mero's future earnings were already set aside for Seer. It was better to skip unnecessary expenses. Knowing the reason wasn't essential. Seer was so good to him. "Forget it, then. It's not important anyway," Seer said dismissively, waving a hand in an offhand manner. At that moment, a ringtone broke the silence. Mero instinctively pressed his hand against the source of the sound, his pocket. His face turned pale. "Sorry. It's mine." "It was just a phone call, why was he so scared?" "Ah, go ahead and answer it," Seer said indifferently, turning away and taking a few steps. Clearly, he had no interest in eavesdropping. Mero stood in place, fumbling nervously as he pulled out his phone. When he saw the name on the screen, his heartbeat quickened unnaturally. "Father," he addressed the person on the other end in a low voice. The man who had given him half his bloodline, the surname Parisha, and recognized him as a legitimate heir, yet also allowed him to be bullied by his other siblings. "Dorink is dead. Does it have anything to do with you?" The voice on the other end skipped all pleasantries, cutting straight to the point. "Dorink was really dead?" "No, it doesn't," Mero replied after a pause, then asked, "How did he die?" The tone between the two was extremely distant, not like father and son, but more like two ordinary people with a bad relationship. Even the relationships between clients and business were closer than theirs. "I'm not sure. I heard someone killed Dorink's bodyguards and everyone in his private residence. I heard you had some disputes with him, and the Mafia Association asked me some questions." Kazma Parish's voice was cold, as if he were speaking to a subordinate. "I know you took something when you left, but I didn't expect you to become someone else's follower out there." The man's voice revealed no emotion. "Don't do anything that tarnishes your surname," he said coldly, as if issuing a final ultimatum. "Master is very good. Being his subordinate won't tarnish my surname," Maro's face gradually regained its color, no longer pale, but his expression turned dark. Even though it was his biological father speaking this way, he couldn't help but feel angered. On the other end of the phone, the man stopped speaking and directly hung up. Maro clenched his phone, his veins bulging, his eyes filled with a cryptic expression. "Done talking?" Seer glanced at Maro, who seemed to be exuding dark energy, and asked. Maro looked up at him, offering a smile as gentle and obedient as always, with an air of acquiescence. "I just got some news. Dorink, the leader, was killed by someone who forcibly broke into his home. That person's identity is unclear." Maro couldn't wait to share the information he knew. "The identity doesn't really matter. He must have offended plenty of people in the Mafia. It's not surprising if someone eventually seeks revenge and wipes out his whole family," Seer shrugged casually, speaking lightly. "Once you're in the underworld, who hasn't killed someone? Who doesn't have enemies? Maybe someone was harboring deep hatred, working hard to get stronger, and finally got their revenge. Thinking about it, it makes for a good novel plot. Given that, it makes sense that the client's death led the Zulks to abandon the mission." Seer nodded slightly, his tone light. "Although the death was a bit too coincidental, so what? It wasn't his concern. After all, he was the one who benefited and didn't need to worry too much about the specifics." Indeed, those who oppose the master never end well," Maro said with a look of conviction, believing this was Dorink's fate for going against Seer. "Seer, who did nothing at all. Is this what a toxic fan's thinking is like?" He was starting to understand the mentality of entertainment industry fandoms. Only one person was already so eloquent. If there were millions of such fans, just imagine how he'd be lifted up. Now that he thought about it, it was a sweet kind of trouble. "Master, I want to visit Yorknew," Maro hesitantly requested. There were things he had to do, and it was time to do them. "Sure, there's also a target over at Yorbian," Seer replied casually. "There aren't many valuable individuals left here," he said as he lazily flipped through the bounty photos. "The higher the bounty, the richer the criminal. For those with a low bounty, they aren't evil enough, and thus aren't rich enough. If they're not rich enough, there's no need to waste time looking for them. Some criminals don't even have any distinguishing features, and nothing else going for them. Those are particularly troublesome to find. It's just a waste of time, so no need to bother. Relying solely on bounties doesn't seem like enough. Poaching beasts, for example, seems illegal. Maybe treasure hunting could work. Looking for ruins, the antiques in them must be worth a lot. If he happens to find an undiscovered ruin with lots of treasures, after cleaning it out, not only could he make 100 million, but maybe even a couple billion. Or he could become a middleman, reselling goods. In this world, valuable items all have a presence. As long as he stands at the antique market and uses his 6 eyes to look, he'll immediately know which items are worth something. Becoming wealthy would be easy. Turns out, I was too narrow-minded before. Those who haven't tried to earn money like this are like this." Seer rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Those who lack experience and common sense. As long as you open your mind, there are countless ways to make money." He had lived a life too smooth to understand, born into wealth. After casually posting a cosplay video, he became popular just based on his looks, and from there, his fame just kept growing. He accepted advertisements based on his mood, sometimes not even taking one in a month. To put it bluntly, he wasn't grounded enough, and on top of that, he spent so much time in the two-dimensional world, with a slightly delusional personality, making him even less grounded. It's fine though, after Maro's matter is settled, he'll go look for ruins. The more money, the better. After all, there should be a lot of good things in the system shop. Let's see if he can buy everything out. Chapter 74. Traveling by airship from the current continent to Yorbian, where Yorknu City is located, took several days. Seer didn't take on any new tasks during the journey, but he reviewed the last task he had yet to complete. The target was Khyber Fall, a serial killer. Initially, his bounty was 150 million, but it had now risen to 200 million. Rumor had it that he had fled from the Balsa archipelago all the way to the eastern part of the Yorbian continent, committing several more crimes along the way. This guy still hasn't been caught. 3 hunters. Pathetic. Seer scoffed, a cold laugh escaping as he recalled the details provided when he first accepted the task. 3 hunters had spent nearly 2 months pursuing him and still couldn't catch him. Useless. The airship landed at Lynn Palace Airport in Yorknu City. Seer and Marlowe disembarked and spotted a group of figures dressed in black suits standing on a clearing not far away. It was obvious they were members of the local mafia, Yorknu City's infamous specialty. While other cities also had mafia organizations, Yorknu was unique in that it was entirely dominated by them. This was why the mafia held their massive annual underground auction here. After all, 90% of their auction items were less than legal. Hosting the event in Yorknu ensured minimal interference. The people around them seemed entirely accustomed to the sight of mafia members everywhere. No one even batted an eye. Even tour guides for sightseeing groups would go out of their way to introduce tourists to Yorknu City's mafia culture. "Sir, would you like to stay at the Palatia estate with me?" Marrow asked respectfully, a hint of hope in his tone. Seer glanced at him before waving dismissively. "No, I'd probably clash with your family." From Marrow's descriptions, Seer had gathered that his father was a cold, ruthless mafia boss, and his siblings were a group of spoiled and arrogant heirs. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done something as extreme as locking Marrow in a dog cage. If Seer accompanied Marrow to the estate, it was almost certain that the family wouldn't treat him kindly. Not that Seer cared about their attitudes, he just knew himself well enough. If those people treated Marrow poorly, it was one thing. But if they directed that attitude at him, "If I went with you, you'd become a real orphan pretty quickly." The white-haired, blue-eyed young man smirked, his words carrying a subtle threat. The implication was clear: if I went, I'd wipe out your entire family. "True, that kind of environment wouldn't be worthy of your presence," Marrow replied without protest, smiling as he agreed. After all, he didn't like his family either. That was why he had escaped in the first place. "Where's the best hotel in Yorknu?" "I'll stay there instead," Seer asked lazily, turning to Marrow, who was familiar with the city. "The best hotel? It's over there." Marlowe naturally pointed in a specific direction. Due to its rampant mafia culture, Yorknu had numerous abandoned buildings, most of which were sites of gruesome deaths. During the day, the city didn't look much different from any other. The pedestrians on the streets seemed perfectly ordinary. But once night fell, those same unassuming people could very well turn out to be members of a mafia syndicate. Underground arenas are everywhere in this city, with competitions as simple as arm wrestling. Yorknu City has a rotten side, but it also boasts a luxurious, decadent face that stands out as one of the most opulent in their known world. "Then I'll stay there," Seer decided immediately. 10 minutes later, he checked into the most luxurious hotel in Yorknu City. After escorting Seer to his room, Marrow reluctantly left, turning back every few steps. Khyber Fall. 3 days ago, he killed someone in a small town near Yorknu and then disappeared. Most likely, he's already entered Yorknu City. It's a mafia stronghold, full of filth and crime. The police won't come here to arrest anyone, and powerful criminals are often welcomed by the mafia. They're given fake identities to evade capture. No wonder this city is called a paradise for fugitives. Khyber Fall might have already become one of some mafia boss's henchmen. That might make things a bit troublesome. But it could also mean more profit. Too bad Dorink is dead, otherwise, I could have demanded compensation for emotional distress from him. Arm wrestling competitions, underground boxing matches. All viable options. Yorknew's environment is perfect for broke, desperate criminals to make a quick buck before disappearing again, Sear muttered as he changed into clean clothes after a shower. Standing on the balcony of his luxurious top-floor suite, he gazed down at the city. Yorknew City at night was far more beautiful than during the day. The glowing neon lights gave the city a dreamy quality. Looking down at the vibrant city from this height sparked an inexplicable urge. To jump. Jump down. And immerse himself in the bustling chaos of the city. Sear leaned on the balcony railing with one hand, then vaulted over it, leaping downwards. The full moon hung high in the sky, its gentle glow illuminating the scene. Against the dark night, the fleeting silhouette of a white-haired figure was barely noticeable. The sound of wind rushed past his ears, his clothes flapped wildly, and his hair stood up from the force. But Sear smiled, his expression light and carefree. As he neared the ground, he spun several times to dissipate most of the impact, landing gracefully amidst the crowd. A group of pedestrians stared upward in shock, puzzled about why someone had just fallen from the sky. Sear smoothed his hair, pulled up the hood of his sweatshirt, and blended into the crowd. I knew it would be fun jumping from that height. An extreme sport, exhilarating and entertaining. When he was being chased in Meteor City, he found it just as thrilling. The terrain there made running feel like parkour. This time, it felt more like bungee jumping, the only difference being that he didn't use a rope. Next time, he mused, he could try jumping off an airship with an umbrella. Would that count as skydiving? His steps were light and full of joy, and the upward curve of his lips showed just how delighted he was. Walking down the crowded streets, observing the surrounding shops, Sear showed no sign of impatience. He casually followed a few rough-looking individuals, ordinary in attire but with good builds and fierce expressions, and easily located one of the so-called underground fight rings. Unlike the formal setting of Heaven's Arena, this place offered only a small makeshift ring, surrounded by tiers of steps where spectators sat or stood to watch the matches. As soon as Sear stepped inside, the pungent mix of cigarette smoke, cheap perfume, and low-quality alcohol assaulted his senses. The fighters here were ordinary, so ordinary that Sear instantly dismissed the idea of stepping into the ring for fun. After watching 2 matches, boredom crept in, and he was just about to leave when a new man entered the ring. Short red-brown hair, reddish-brown eyes, pale skin. Kleiber Fall? Why is this guy participating in a fight ring? Shouldn't he already be working as some mafia boss's bodyguard? Sear's gaze locked onto the newcomer, his eyes filled with curiosity. Do your best, my darling doggy. A sultry woman with a curvaceous figure, dressed in a spaghetti-strap dress, waved lazily at the man in the ring. Her hair was tied up elegantly, and her demeanor exuded seductive charm. To Sear's amusement, the A-class wanted criminal, known for murdering women, responded to her with wide, puppy-like eyes practically sparkling with pink hearts. Oh, now this is getting interesting, Sear murmured with amusement, taking a seat at the side. He crossed his legs and settled in to watch what would happen next. Chapter 75. An A-class wanted criminal, someone who had killed over 100 people and was also a NEN user, wouldn't lose in such an unremarkable underground fight ring. Sear watched as Kleiber Fall won match after match. With every victory, the woman in the audience would throw a flying kiss and a sultry glance at him, followed by a teasing line. Well done, my darling doggy. I'll reward you after this. At this, Kleiber Fall would work even harder to perform impressively. It was bizarre. Incredibly bizarre. Kleiber, who had always targeted women, was widely believed to be an extreme misogynist. And yet, here he was, obediently responding to a woman who kept calling him her good dog. Sear stared at the woman's back for a moment before shifting his gaze. After profiting significantly from Kleiber's wins, the woman finally gave him his reward when his match was over. The big winner of the night, Kleiber, drew everyone's attention as he walked up to the woman. She remained seated, raised her hand without hesitation, and slapped him across the face. Her manicured nails left several bloody scratches on his cheek, and the crisp sound of the slap drew the attention of everyone in the arena. "Well done, you stupid dog." Her voice was arrogant, dripping with disdain. Kleiber dropped to his knees, pleading with her in a fanatical display of submission. "You're so pathetic," she sneered, kicking him in the face and knocking him to the ground. Kleiber whimpered. "Worthless mutt," she spat, pressing her foot harder against him and stomping aggressively. The scene was so shocking that everyone present was left utterly dumbfounded. Wasn't this guy dominating the ring just moments ago? How did he turn into this the moment he stepped off? "Could you two please take your interests home? Or at least to a hotel? Seriously, they'd be happy to pay for the room." Seer watched with interest, even pulling out his phone to record the scene. The world of hunters certainly had no shortage of fascinating characters and abilities. Who would have guessed this guy was a 200 million worth fugitive? Seer stood and quietly followed the pair. The woman dragged Kleiber out of the underground arena, but they hadn't gone far when a figure appeared ahead of them. It was someone dressed in a white hoodie with the hood up. The woman halted in her tracks as the figure removed their hood, revealing snow-white hair and delicate features. It was immediately apparent that this was a boy, around 13 or 14 years old. But what stood out the most were the strange black markings on his face and the sky-like blue of his eyes. This boy. He'd undoubtedly catch the interest of many collectors. For example, things like hair, eyes, or skin. "Now it's interview time," the white-haired, blue-eyed boy said with a bright, cheerful smile. "A-class wanted criminal Kleiber Fall, do you have any thoughts about becoming someone else's dog?" he asked in a mocking tone. The woman glanced back at the man she was holding on to. Of course, she knew his identity. From the very day this man targeted her, intending to kill her, but ended up being controlled by her ability instead, he had willingly confessed his identity to her. Yet, she hadn't turned him in for the bounty. Why? Because he was a useful tool, and she wasn't a bounty hunter, she was a contract hunter. Hired by the wealthy to handle tasks, whether legal or illegal. That was her role as a contract hunter. What's more, she wasn't even a licensed hunter, having never acquired an official license. In this world, there were plenty of people who called themselves hunters without ever earning the official title, and she was one of them. She had found herself a capable dog, but it seemed she might have invited trouble as well. "None of your business," Kleiber growled. While he was submissive toward the woman, his attitude toward others was completely different. His gaze at the white-haired boy was filled with murderous intent. "Aren't you a dog? At least act like one," the boy said, raising his brows, his voice dropping to a lower pitch. He smirked, his lips curling upward. For instance, an invisible attack hit Kleiber, so fast that he didn't even have time to react. By the time he realized what had happened, his hands and feet were severed. Unable to maintain his balance, he fell to his knees. Seer casually took a few steps forward, looking down at the man from above with an expression full of amusement. "Kneeling like a dog suits you perfectly," he remarked. "You," Kleiber Fall stammered, staring at his cleanly severed, blood-soaked wrists. He didn't need to check to know that his ankles were in the same condition. With his balance completely gone, his body swayed unsteadily, unable to stand. The woman's eyes gleamed with anticipation and challenge. "Kid, do you want to kiss Big Sister?" She playfully tapped her glossy, sparkling lips with her finger, her tone dripping with seduction. A strong, handsome boy like this, it was enough to make her heart itch. "You." The white-haired boy stared at her with his sky-blue eyes for a moment before realization dawned on him. "Oh, I see. Your ability is triggered through a kiss, isn't it? If you can't kiss, then it's useless. Your physical strength is average, you can't fight, and your nen is mediocre. You're practically a beginner. You're not a professional hunter, he concluded lightly. Even the way she used her ability was crude. Since your ability is barely interesting, I'll let you off this time, he said casually before completely ignoring her and turning his attention back to Kleiber. He began his routine interrogation, a ritual every criminal had to go through before their death. Got money? How much in fake accounts? What are the passwords? Want to buy your life, or die right now? The woman, now ignored, stood to the side, listening to the boy's questions. A sinking feeling began to grow in her chest. Kleiber's money. It was all in her hands. Crap. Why does it feel like I'm in a really bad situation right now? Could I still escape? But this boy had taken her dog's hands and feet without a sound. If she tried to turn and run, her end probably wouldn't be much better than Kleiber's. Kleiber would never betray her under the influence of her ability, but her ability could still be interrupted. Then maybe I can try to distract him? Kid, why aren't you answering my question? The woman asked with a smile. As she hoped, the white-haired boy turned to look at her, but what he said next was not what she wanted to hear. Ah, so you've taken it, he said knowingly, his tone calm. Hand it over willingly,